She was worth $400 million. She commanded 3,000 employees. She had corner offices in 6 cities and a reputation that made grown men stutter. But at 5:03 on a rainy Portland morning, Vivian Cross stood outside a 2-bedroom apartment in a faded building, mascara running down her face, shaking like a woman who had finally lost everything that mattered. And when the door opened, she looked at the single father in his worn t-shirt and whispered the words that would change both their lives forever. I didn't know where else to go. If you want to see how one desperate knock rebuilt 2 broken lives, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain had been falling on Portland for 6 days straight. Noah Mercer had stopped noticing it somewhere around day 3. The way you stop noticing a chronic ache that settles into your bones and becomes part of who you are. The gray skies, the constant drumming against the windows, the smell of wet concrete that crept through the gaps in the old building's weatherproofing, it was all just background noise now, white static in a life that had learned to function on autopilot. He had been dreaming about numbers again, spreadsheets stretching into infinity, columns that refused to balance, decimal points that danced away every time he reached for them. It was the kind of dream that accountants had when they were 3 weeks behind on a major audit and running on 4 hours of sleep. The kind of dream that felt less like rest and more like unpaid overtime for his subconscious. The pounding started at 5:03 a.m. Noah's eyes snapped open, and for a disorienting moment, he thought the sound was part of the dream, some glitch in the matrix of his anxiety finally manifesting as physical noise. But then it came again, urgent and desperate, and he was already swinging his legs over the side of the bed before his brain fully caught up with his body. His first thought was Lily. He was out of the bedroom and halfway down the narrow hallway before he remembered that his daughter was safe in her room, that the soft glow of her unicorn nightlight was probably casting purple shadows across her sleeping face right now. The pounding wasn't coming from inside the apartment. It was coming from the front door. Noah paused, one hand pressed against the wall to steady himself. His heart was hammering now, pumping adrenaline through a system that hadn't fully woken up yet. In the 2 years since he'd moved into this apartment, since the divorce, since Elena had decided that motherhood was a cage she needed to escape, no one had ever knocked on his door at 5 in the morning. The building wasn't the kind of place where emergencies happened. It was the kind of place where people minded their own business, where the halls smelled faintly of someone else's cooking and the elevator took 3 attempts to reach the 4th floor. It was affordable. It was safe enough. It was what a single father could manage on an accountant's salary while still putting money away for his daughter's future. The pounding came again, and this time it was accompanied by a voice. Please, pour... The word cracked through the cheap wood of the door, high and desperate, and nothing like any voice Noah had ever expected to hear in this hallway. Please, I know you're in there. I saw your light. He hadn't turned on any lights. His bedroom window faced the street, and maybe, the glow from Lily's nightlight had been visible from outside. But that would mean someone had been standing in the rain, looking up at his building, watching for signs of life at 5 in the morning. Noah moved toward the door slowly, his bare feet silent on the worn carpet. The peephole was old and cloudy, the kind that turned everything into a fisheye blur of shapes and shadows. He pressed his eye against it and saw nothing useful. A smear of darkness, the suggestion of movement, the glint of something that might have been streetlight reflecting off wet hair. Who is it? He kept his voice low, mindful of Lily sleeping 20 feet away. Noah. The voice again, and this time he felt something shift in his chest, some recognition that his conscious mind hadn't caught up to yet. It's Vivian. Vivian Cross. Please. I know this is insane. I know I have no right to be here, but please. His hand was on the deadbolt before she finished speaking. Vivian Cross. The name alone was enough to send most people at Whitmore Analytics scrambling for excuses, checking their work, practicing their explanations in bathroom mirrors. She was the CEO, the Iron Woman, the force of nature who had taken a mid-sized data company and turned it into a regional powerhouse through sheer will and an unwillingness to accept anything less than excellence. Noah had worked in her company for 4 years, and in all that time he could count on one hand the number of direct interactions he'd had with her. She didn't know names below the director level. She didn't make small talk in elevators. She moved through the building like a weather system, and everyone tracked her movements the way sailors tracked storms. And now she was standing outside his apartment at 5 in the morning. Noah undid the deadbolt, turned the handle, and opened the door. The woman standing in his hallway looked nothing like the CEO of Whitmore Analytics. Vivian Cross, as the company knew her, wore power suits in charcoal and navy, heels that added 3 inches to her already considerable height, hair pulled back in configurations so precise they looked architectural. She spoke in complete sentences, never raised her voice, never needed to. She was 43 years old, divorced as of 8 months ago, and worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 million depending on the current stock price. The woman in Noah's hallway was wearing a black dress that had clearly been expensive before the rain got to it, now clinging to her frame in ways that would have been inappropriate in any context except tragedy. Her hair was plastered to her skull, dark strands stuck to her cheeks, her neck, her shoulders. Mascara had carved twin rivers down her face, pooling in the hollows beneath her eyes. She was shaking, actually shaking, her arms wrapped around herself in a way that made her look smaller than Noah had ever imagined she could be. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. He had seen Vivian Cross's eyes in board meetings, in all-hands announcements, in the brief moments when she passed through the accounting department on her way to somewhere more important. They were gray-green, the color of sage, and they had always carried a particular quality, focused, assessing, utterly in control. They were the eyes of someone who had seen every trick, anticipated every move, planned 17 steps ahead of whatever game you thought you were playing. The eyes looking at him now were the eyes of someone who had been broken open. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered, and her voice cracked on the last word. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you must think I'm... Come inside." The words left Noah's mouth before he could think about them, before he could weigh the implications, before the rational part of his brain could point out all the reasons why inviting his CEO into his apartment at 5 in the morning was a phenomenally bad idea. He just saw a human being in pain standing in a cold hallway, shaking like she might shake apart entirely. And Noah Mercer had spent too many years learning how to recognize that particular kind of breaking. He stepped back, holding the door open. Vivian hesitated for a moment, something flickering across her face. Surprise, maybe, or relief, or the particular vulnerability of someone who had expected rejection and received kindness instead. Then she stepped inside, and Noah closed the door softly behind her. The apartment seemed smaller with her in it, which didn't make any logical sense. She was actually shorter than he had realized, maybe 5'6" without the heels she always wore to work. And the way she was holding herself, shoulders curved inward, arms still wrapped around her body, made her seem even smaller. But there was something about her presence, some quality of compressed intensity, that made the modest living room feel like a space designed for someone else's life. Noah became acutely aware of everything she must be seeing. The second-hand couch he'd bought from a colleague who was moving. The TV that was 2 generations out of date. The toys scattered in the corner, Lily's building blocks, her stuffed elephant, the art supplies she refused to put away. The stack of bills on the kitchen counter that he really should have filed days ago. The general atmosphere of a life held together by routine and determination and not much else. If Vivian noticed any of it, she didn't show it. She was staring at the carpet, her breathing shallow and quick, her whole body still trembling in micro-movements that she didn't seem able to control. "Sit down," Noah said quietly. "I'll make coffee." She looked up at him then, and the raw surprise in her expression made something ache behind his ribs. "You don't have to... It's already 5 in the morning. I'd be making coffee anyway." It wasn't true. He usually slept until 6:30, his alarm precisely timed to give him 45 minutes before Lily woke up. But she didn't need to know that. "Sit." He didn't wait to see if she obeyed. He moved into the kitchen, filling the cheap Mr. Coffee machine, measuring grounds by muscle memory while his mind tried to catch up with reality. Vivian Cross was sitting on his couch. Vivian Cross, who approved budgets, who signed paychecks, who once fired an entire division and didn't blink. She was here, in his apartment, and she was crying. The coffee maker began its familiar gurgling, and Noah used the time to breathe. When he came back into the living room with 2 mugs, his was the one Lily had painted at a birthday party. Uneven letters spelling "Best Dad" in purple and pink. Vivian's was a plain white mug he kept for guests he never had. She had at least stopped trembling. She was still sitting exactly where he'd left her, though perched on the edge of the cushion like she might bolt at any moment. "Thank you." She took the mug with both hands, wrapping her fingers around it like she was trying to absorb its warmth. "I know this is... I don't even know what to call this. Inappropriate doesn't begin to cover it. It's coffee." Noah sat down in the armchair across from her, deliberately choosing the seat that kept space between them. Not an HR violation. The ghost of something that might have been a laugh escaped her lips. It sounded rusty, unused. "You're remarkably calm about this." "I have a 4-year-old. Being calm when someone shows up crying has become a survival skill." Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of curiosity breaking through the raw pain. "I forgot you had a daughter, Lily, right?" Noah nodded, surprised she knew the name. "She's asleep down the hall, so we should probably keep our voices down." "God, yes, of course." Vivian pressed a hand to her forehead, looking genuinely horrified. "I didn't even think... What happened?" The question hung in the air between them, simple and direct. Noah had learned a long time ago that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was cut through the noise and give someone permission to tell the truth. Vivian stared at her coffee for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully flat, the way people spoke when they were trying to control something that wanted to spiral. "I had a date tonight." Whatever Noah had been expecting, it wasn't that. He kept his face neutral, waiting. "Richard Thornton. He's the CEO of Cascade Financial." Vivian's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. On paper, it was perfect. 2 successful people, both recently divorced, both in the same professional circles. Our mutual friends have been trying to set us up for months. I finally said yes because... She trailed off, shaking her head. "Because I thought maybe it was time. 8 months since the divorce. 8 months of everyone telling me I needed to move on, to put myself out there, to stop being so closed off." "Okay." He took me to Maria. 13-course tasting menu, $3,000 wine pairings, the whole performance. The flatness in her voice was starting to crack, something darker bleeding through. "And for the first hour it was fine, pleasant. We talked about markets, about acquisitions, about the kind of things people like us are supposed to talk about." Noah noticed the way she said "people like us," like it was a category she'd been assigned to rather than one she'd chosen. And then he started... Vivian paused, seeming to search for the right words. He started correcting me. Small things at first. The way I was holding my wine glass. The way I was describing a deal I'd closed last quarter. The pronunciation of a word I've been saying correctly my entire life. She laughed again, and this time there was no humor in it at all. And I realized he wasn't interested in me. He was interested in fixing me, in taking this woman who had built something real and grinding her down until she fit into whatever shape made him comfortable. "What did you do?" I told him that if he corrected me one more time, I was going to pour the $3,000 wine over his head. Vivian met Noah's eyes, and for just a moment, he saw a flash of the woman who terrified boardrooms. He told me I needed to learn to take constructive criticism, that successful men didn't like women who were too much, that maybe the reason my marriage failed was because I didn't know when to let someone else take the lead. The words settled into the room like stones dropped into still water. "I see," Noah said quietly. "Do you?" Vivian's voice cracked on the question. "Because I've been hearing some version of that my entire life. From my father, who thought I should have been a boy. From my ex-husband, who wanted a trophy wife and got a CEO instead. From colleagues, from investors, from every man who's ever decided that my success was somehow a personal insult to them." She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes, and when she spoke again, the words came out thick with tears she was trying to suppress. "And I told myself that it didn't matter anymore, that I was past it, that I had built something that proved them all wrong, and their opinions were irrelevant. But I sat there in that restaurant, listening to another man tell me that I was too much, and I realized I was going to spend the rest of my life hearing that same thing from different mouths, and I just... She made a small, helpless gesture. I broke. Right there at the table. Started crying in front of Richard Thornton and his 13-course tasting menu, and he looked at me like I was some kind of malfunctioning machine. Noah said nothing. He just sat with her words, letting them exist without judgment. I walked out, left him with the check, which I'm sure he'll find a way to make my fault. Called for my car, but I couldn't go home. My apartment feels like a mausoleum. All that space, all that emptiness, and I couldn't face it tonight. Vivian finally looked at him again, and her expression was raw with a kind of bewildered pain. I drove for 2 hours. Just drove in circles through the rain, trying to remember how to breathe. And somehow, I don't even remember making the decision. I ended up here. Here, Noah repeated slowly. At my apartment, at 5 a.m. Yes. Why? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked, her hands tightening around the coffee mug she hadn't drunk from. I don't know if I can explain it. Try. For a long moment, Vivian just stared at him. The rain continued its percussion against the windows, steady and relentless. Somewhere in the building, a pipe groaned. The refrigerator hummed its constant low note. Do you remember the Hendricks audit? She finally asked. Noah frowned, searching his memory. The pharmaceutical company? The one with the offshore subsidiary discrepancies? That's the one. 2 years ago. There was a meeting, a war room really, where we were trying to figure out how to address the regulatory concerns without tanking the deal. I came in halfway through, and everyone was shouting. Everyone had a solution. Everyone was trying to impress me, or protect themselves, or position themselves for whatever came next. Noah remembered now. It had been chaos, the kind of high-stakes situation where careers could be made or destroyed depending on which way the wind blew. He'd been one of 15 people in that room, the most junior by at least a decade, pulled in because he'd done the initial compliance review. And there you were, Vivian continued, sitting in the corner, not saying a word. And when I finally asked if anyone had actually looked at the raw numbers, everyone started talking louder, explaining why their solution was the right one. Except you. I had the numbers in front of me. You did. And when I finally got everyone to shut up and asked you directly, you didn't try to spin it. You didn't try to make yourself look good. You just laid out exactly what the data showed, what the risks were, and what options existed. No agenda, no ego. Noah remembered that moment differently. He remembered being terrified, his palms sweating, convinced that opening his mouth would somehow end his career. He'd only spoken because she'd asked him directly, and even then, he'd expected to be dismissed. That was just doing my job. No, Vivian shook her head slowly. That was being honest. And you have no idea how rare that is in my world. She set down the coffee mug, her hands clasped in her lap now. After that meeting, I started noticing you. I wasn't watching you, but I noticed when you were in a room, the way people talked to you, the way you talked to them. Noah felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. I'm just an accountant. You're the only person in that entire building who looks at me like I'm a person. Vivian's voice was quiet now, stripped of pretense. Everyone else looks at me like I'm a title, a problem, a stepping stone, a threat. But you, when we pass in the hallway, when I come to the floor and everyone scrambles, you just nod. Like I'm a colleague. Like my title doesn't matter. Your title doesn't determine your humanity. See, She laughed again, but this time it was thick with tears. That's exactly what I mean. You just say things like that. Like they're obvious. Like everyone should know them. Everyone should. But they don't. Vivian wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing the mascara even further. They really, really don't. Silence settled between them again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Less charged. More honest. Noah stood up and walked to the kitchen. He came back with a roll of paper towels, handed them to her without comment. She stared at them for a moment, then let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Paper towels. God, when was the last time I used paper towels? I have embroidered hand towels in my bathroom that cost more than this entire roll. They're effective, Noah said simply. She tore off a sheet and pressed it to her face, not caring how it looked. When she lowered it, streaked with black, she met his eyes again. "I'm sorry," she said, "for showing up like this, for dumping all of this on you, for being so—" She waved a hand vaguely at herself. "This. You don't have to apologize for being human. I'm your CEO, Noah. This isn't how this is supposed to work." "How what is supposed to work?" "Any of it." She gestured again, more expansively this time. "The power dynamic, the professional boundaries, the basic rules of how people interact." Noah considered this for a moment. "Do you want me to treat you like my CEO right now?" The question seemed to confuse her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you want me to be formal, careful, worried about my job?" He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "Because I can do that if you need me to. But it seemed like you showed up here because you wanted to be treated like a person, not a position." Vivian stared at him. The rain had picked up again outside, drumming harder against the glass. "How are you so calm about this?" "I told you. I have a 4-year-old. That's not a real answer." Noah was quiet for a moment, weighing how much to say. Outside, a car passed slowly through the rain, its headlights briefly illuminating the curtains before fading away. "My ex-wife left when Lily was 8 months old," he finally said. "She said—" He paused, shook his head slightly. "It doesn't matter what she said. The point is, I had an infant who needed me, and I had a choice. I could fall apart, or I could figure out how to be what she needed. So I learned. I learned how to stay calm during fevers and tantrums, and nights when she wouldn't stop crying and I hadn't slept in 36 hours. I learned how to be steady, because steady was what she needed." "That sounds—" Vivian trailed off, searching for the word. "Exhausting," Noah supplied. "It's exhausting, but it's also—" He stopped, not sure how to explain it. "When you're all someone has, you learn what really matters. And what matters is showing up, being present, not panicking when things get hard." "And that's what you're doing now? Showing up?" "You knocked on my door. You were in pain. What else was I supposed to do?" The simplicity of it seemed to break something in her. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, and this time she didn't try to stop them. "I don't—" Her voice caught. "I don't understand you." "There's nothing to understand. I'm not complicated." "Everyone's complicated." "Maybe." Noah shrugged. "But my complications are pretty simple. I have a daughter I love, a job that pays the bills, and an apartment that keeps the rain off. That's my life. That's all of it." "That sounds—" She searched for the word again. "Peaceful." "It's not. It's hard. It's lonely, sometimes, more often than I'd like to admit. It's wondering if I'm doing enough, being enough, giving her what she needs." He paused. "But it's also real. It's mine. I built it from whatever was left after everything fell apart, and I'm proud of it." Vivian was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The tears had slowed, and something else was emerging, something thoughtful, considering. "I don't know what that feels like," she said quietly. "Building something real. Everything I've built has been about proving something. To my father, to my ex-husband, to all the people who said I couldn't." She looked down at her hands. "I've spent my whole life so focused on proving them wrong that I never stopped to ask if I was building something I actually wanted." "And was it?" The question landed softly between them. "I don't know." Vivian's voice was barely above a whisper. "I used to think so. But sitting here now, in your apartment that costs less than my monthly car payment, watching you hand me paper towels instead of platitudes." She looked up at him, and her eyes were clear now, washed clean by tears. "I think I might have gotten it all backwards." A soft sound came from down the hallway. Both of them froze, turning toward it. A moment later, a small figure appeared in the doorway. Lily, in her purple pajamas with the stars on them, one hand rubbing her eye while the other clutched a stuffed elephant. "Daddy?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "I heard talking." Noah was on his feet immediately, moving to crouch down to her level. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm sorry we woke you. I have a friend visiting." "A friend?" Lily peered around him, curiosity pushing past drowsiness. Her eyes landed on Vivian, took in the unfamiliar woman on the couch, the tear-streaked face, the wet hair. Is she sad? She was, Noah said gently, but she's feeling better now. She just needed someone to talk to. Lily considered this with the gravity that only a 4-year-old could muster. Then she walked past Noah, crossed the living room, and stopped in front of Vivian. "When I'm sad," Lily announced, "Daddy makes me hot chocolate. Did you get hot chocolate?" Vivian looked at Noah, then back at Lily, and something in her expression shifted, softened in a way he had never seen at the office. "No," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I got coffee." Lily wrinkled her nose. "Coffee is yucky." "It really is," Vivian agreed. "I can share my elephant if you want." Lily held up the stuffed animal. "His name is Mr. Trumpet. He helps with bad dreams." For a moment, Vivian didn't respond. She just stared at this small person offering comfort with such uncomplicated sincerity. Then slowly, she reached out and touched the elephant's worn trunk. "That's very kind of you, Lily, but I think I'm feeling better now." "Okay." Lily nodded, accepting this. Then, with the ruthless practicality of childhood, she turned back to Noah. "Daddy, can I have cereal?" "It's too early for cereal, sweetheart. Let's get you back to bed." "But I'm awake now." "I know, but the sun's not up yet, which means it's still sleeping time." Lily sighed, the weight of the world in that small sound. "Fine." She looked back at Vivian one more time. "Bye, sad lady." "Goodbye, Lily." Noah scooped his daughter up, carrying her toward the hallway. At the doorway, he paused, looking back at Vivian over Lily's shoulder. "I'll be right back." She nodded, something complicated moving behind her eyes. It took 10 minutes to get Lily settled again, negotiating the precise positioning of Mr. Trumpet, agreeing to leave the door open an extra inch, promising that the sad lady would be okay. By the time Noah returned to the living room, he half expected to find it empty, Vivian having slipped away while he was distracted. But she was still there, sitting on his couch, looking at the corner where Lily's toys were scattered. "She's beautiful," Vivian said without looking up. "Your daughter." "She's my whole world." "I can see that." She finally turned to face him, and her expression was different now, more composed but also more open. "I should go. I've imposed on you enough." "You're not imposing." "Noah." She stood, and even bedraggled and tear-stained, she still carried herself with a kind of grace. "I showed up at your door at 5 in the morning, cried on your couch, and met your child. I have definitely imposed. You needed help. That's not an imposition." "In what world is—" She stopped, shook her head. "Never mind. I don't think I'm equipped to argue with you about this." "Then don't argue." She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her processing, calculating, trying to fit this interaction into a framework that made sense to her. "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question was quiet, genuine, stripped of any professional pretense. "Because you needed kindness." Noah shrugged. "It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Everything in my life is complicated." "It doesn't have to be." She let out a breath that was half laugh, half sigh. "You make it sound so simple." "Some things are simple. We just forget that sometimes, when everything else gets loud." Vivian stood there, in the middle of his modest living room, looking at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. The rain had lightened outside, the drumming softening to a gentle patter. Dawn was approaching, gray light beginning to seep through the curtains. "I should call my driver." "You drove yourself. You said you drove for 2 hours." "Right, I did." She pressed a hand to her forehead, looking genuinely disoriented. My car is downstairs, I think. I don't actually remember parking." "You shouldn't drive right now. You're exhausted." "I'm fine." "You've been crying for hours, you haven't slept, and you just told me you don't remember parking your car. That's not fine." "What do you suggest?" There was a hint of her usual sharpness in the question, the CEO peeking through. "That I stay here? Sleep on your couch?" "The couch is pretty comfortable, actually." She stared at him. "You're serious?" "Get a few hours of sleep. I'll wake you before Lily gets up. You can go home rested, and I won't have to worry about you wrapping your car around a tree." "You'd worry about that?" "Of course I would." The simple honesty of it seemed to destabilize her all over again. She wrapped her arms around herself, looking suddenly very young, very lost. I don't understand this, she said quietly. I don't understand you. I show up unannounced in the middle of the night, completely falling apart, and you just let me in. Make me coffee. Offer me your couch. She shook her head slowly. People don't do this. People should. But they don't. In my experience, they really don't. Noah moved to the closet, pulled out a spare blanket and the extra pillow he kept for the rare occasions when someone needed them. He set them on the couch, smoothing the blanket down. You've been around the wrong people, he said simply. Vivian watched him, and something in her expression cracked, not in a breaking way, but in the way that a wall cracks when it's finally ready to come down. Maybe I have, she whispered. He stepped back, giving her space. Bathroom's down the hall if you need it. There are towels in the cabinet. I'll be in my room if you need anything. Noah. He paused at the hallway entrance, turning back. She was standing by the couch, her hand resting on the blanket he'd laid out, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite name. Thank you, she said, for not being afraid of me. Why would I be afraid of you? Everyone else is. Everyone else doesn't know you. And you do? After one conversation? Noah considered the question seriously, the way he considered everything, with patience, with attention, with the quiet thoughtfulness that Lily had taught him. I know you needed help tonight, he said finally. I know you came here instead of anywhere else. I know you let my daughter see you cry. He paused. That's enough for now. Vivian's eyes glistened in the dim light, but she didn't cry again. She just stood there, holding on to the blanket, looking at him like he'd said something in a language she was only beginning to understand. Good night, Noah. Good night, Vivian. He walked down the hallway to his room, closing the door quietly behind him. For a long moment, he stood in the darkness, listening to the rain, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened settle into his bones. Vivian Cross was sleeping on his couch. Vivian Cross, who could buy his entire building without noticing the charge on her statement. Vivian Cross, who made executives twice her age stammer and sweat. Vivian Cross, who had shown up at his door shattered and desperate and looking for something she couldn't name. Noah got back into bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. He stared at the ceiling, thoughts turning over slowly like stones in a stream. He knew, with a certainty that settled into his gut, that tonight had changed something. That there was no going back to the comfortable anonymity of being just another accountant in a sea of accountants, invisible and safe. But as he listened to the rain finally beginning to ease, as the first hints of dawn crept through his window, Noah Mercer found that he didn't mind. Sometimes, he thought, the most terrifying things were also the most important, and sometimes all it took was opening a door. Wamkem. The morning light filtered gray and soft through Noah's bedroom curtains, and for a few disorienting seconds, he forgot the knock, the rain, the woman on his couch. He reached for the ordinary routines, the mental checklist of packing Lily's lunch, checking the weather, finding matching socks, and then it all came rushing back. Vivian Cross had slept in his living room. Noah sat up slowly, listening. The apartment was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than usual, charged with possibility, with the awareness of another presence. He checked the time, 7:15. Lily usually woke around 7:30, which gave him 15 minutes to figure out how to navigate whatever came next. He dressed quickly, quietly, and made his way to the living room. The couch was empty. The blanket was folded neatly, the pillow placed precisely on top. For a moment, Noah thought she had left without a word, slipped out in the early hours, restored to her normal self, ready to pretend none of this had happened. Then he heard the water running in the bathroom. He moved to the kitchen, started the coffee maker again, tried to find his footing in this strange new territory. What did you say to someone after a night like that? What were the rules? Were there rules? The bathroom door opened and Vivian emerged. She looked different. She'd washed her face, scrubbed away the remnants of mascara, and tied her hair back with what looked like one of Lily's scrunchies, a bright purple elastic covered in cartoon unicorns. Her dress, now dried, looked rumpled in a way that probably cost more than Noah's monthly rent. I borrowed this, she said, touching the scrunchie. I hope that's okay. Lily will probably consider it an honor. A ghost of a smile crossed Vivian's face. It was the only thing I could find. I'm not in the habit of carrying hair ties to dates. Coffee? Please. They stood in the kitchen, morning light turning the space into something softer than it usually seemed. Noah handed her a mug, the same plain white one from last night, and she wrapped her hands around it the same way, seeking warmth. I slept, she said, and there was wonder in her voice. I actually slept. I can't remember the last time I slept without pills, without alcohol, without... She trailed off. I slept on a stranger's couch, and I slept better than I have in months. I'm not a stranger. No. She looked at him over the rim of the mug. I suppose you're not. Not anymore. They drank their coffee in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that settles between people who have seen each other's edges, who don't need to fill every moment with words. I have to go, Vivian finally said. I have a board meeting at 10, and if I show up in last night's dress, there will be questions I'd rather not answer. Okay. Noah. She set down the mug, her expression turning serious. What happened last night? I don't know how to categorize it. I don't know what to do with it. Everything in my life has a box, a label, a place where it belongs. This doesn't fit anywhere. Maybe it doesn't need to fit. Things need to fit. That's how you make sense of them. Is it? Noah shrugged. My daughter's favorite game is building towers with blocks that don't match. She thinks the weird shapes are the most interesting. Vivian stared at him. Are you comparing our situation to children's building blocks? I'm saying that maybe not everything has to fit in a predetermined box. Maybe some things just are what they are. And what is this? I don't know yet. Noah met her eyes steadily. But I'm okay with not knowing. Something shifted in her expression. A softening, a yielding. You're very strange, Noah Mercer. I've been told. I have to go. You said that. I know. But she didn't move. She stood there, in his kitchen, wearing his daughter's unicorn scrunchie, looking at him like he was something she wanted to solve but couldn't. I'll see you at work. I'll be there. Same desk I've had for 4 years. I know which desk is yours. The admission hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement that this wasn't as random as it might have seemed, that she had noticed him before last night, had been aware of him in ways that went beyond a CEO's awareness of her employees. Goodbye, Vivian. Goodbye, Noah. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle, and looked back at him one more time. Her eyes were clear now, gray-green and thoughtful, and for just a moment Noah saw past the CEO, past the Iron Woman, past all the armor she had built over a lifetime. He saw someone who was afraid, someone who was hopeful, someone who was standing on the edge of something and trying to decide whether to jump. Then she opened the door and was gone, her footsteps fading down the hallway, and Noah was left standing in his kitchen with 2 empty coffee mugs and a world that felt slightly tilted on its axis. Daddy? He turned. Lily was standing in the doorway, still in her star pajamas, Mr. Trumpet dangling from one hand. Good morning, sweetheart. Where did the sad lady go? She went home. She's feeling better now. Lily nodded, accepting this with 4-year-old pragmatism. Can I have cereal now? Yes. Noah smiled, reaching for the box on top of the refrigerator. You can have cereal now. As he poured the Cheerios into Lily's bowl, as he listened to her chatter about her dreams and her plans for the day, and the important business of being 4 years old, Noah Mercer let himself feel it. The shift, the change, the opening of a door he hadn't known was there. Something had started last night. He didn't know where it would lead. He didn't know if it would lead anywhere at all. Maybe Vivian Cross would walk back into Whitmore Analytics tomorrow and become the Iron Woman again, and this night would fade into the kind of memory that felt more like a dream than reality. But as he watched his daughter eat her cereal, as the gray Portland morning slowly brightened outside, Noah found that he didn't want to go back, didn't want to unknow what he now knew about the woman who ran his company, who had shown up at his door broken and desperate and looking for something real. The weekend stretched ahead of him. 2 days of ordinary life, of playground visits and grocery shopping and bedtime stories. 2 days before he would see her again, before he would know whether last night had been a beginning or an ending. He could wait. He had learned over 4 years of single parenting that patience was its own kind of strength, and some things he was beginning to understand were worth waiting for. Monday arrived the way Mondays always did, with the reluctant surrender of a weekend that had felt both too long and too short. Noah had spent those 2 days in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of his ordinary life while some part of his mind stayed anchored to that rainy morning. He took Lily to the park on Saturday, pushing her on the swings while she shrieked with delight, and found himself wondering what Vivian Cross was doing at that exact moment. He made spaghetti for dinner, Lily's favorite, and caught himself staring at the couch where she had slept, the blanket still carrying a faint trace of perfume he didn't recognize. By Sunday night, he had convinced himself that none of it mattered, that Vivian would return to her corner office and her board meetings and her life of private cars and 13-course tasting menus, and he would return to his spreadsheets and his modest salary and his 2-bedroom apartment with the leaky faucet he kept meaning to fix. The universe would correct itself, the way it always did, and the strange intimacy of that morning would fade into something he could file away under things that happened once. But when he walked into Whitmore Analytics at 8:47 on Monday morning, coffee in hand, badge swiped, elevator summoned, he knew immediately that something had shifted. It was in the air. A tension, a buzz, the particular electricity that filled a building when something significant was about to happen. People were clustered in small groups, speaking in low voices, glancing toward the executive floor with expressions that mixed curiosity and concern. "Did you hear?" Marcus Chen fell into step beside Noah as he made his way to his desk. Marcus was a senior analyst, one of the few people in accounting who Noah would call a friend, and his face was animated with the particular excitement of someone who had gossip to share. "Emergency all-hands meeting at 10. Vivian called it herself." Noah's stomach tightened, but he kept his voice neutral. "About what?" "Nobody knows, but there are rumors about an acquisition. Something big." Marcus lowered his voice. Collins from legal was in early, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Whatever this is, it's major." "I'm sure we'll find out at 10. "You're remarkably calm about this." "I've learned not to speculate about things I can't control." Marcus shook his head, grinning. "Man, nothing rattles you, does it? I've always admired that about you, Noah. The rest of us are running around like the sky is falling, and you're just steady." Steady? Noah thought about that word as he settled into his desk, booting up his computer, arranging his workspace with the precision that 4 years of routine had ingrained. He didn't feel steady. He felt like he was standing on a fault line, waiting for the ground to shift. The hours between 8:47 and 10 across passed with excruciating slowness. Noah tried to focus on the quarterly projections he'd been working on, the numbers blurring together as his mind wandered to places it shouldn't go. He thought about the way Vivian had looked in his kitchen, wearing Lily's unicorn scrunchie. He thought about the way she'd said his name, not like she was addressing an employee, but like she was talking to someone who mattered. He thought about the way she'd asked him why he wasn't afraid of her, and the genuine confusion in her voice when he'd said everyone else didn't know her. At 9:55, the migration began. People rose from their desks, gathering tablets and phones, moving toward the large conference center on the 3rd floor where all-hands meetings were held. Noah joined the flow, finding a spot near the back of the room, positioning himself where he could see without being seen. The room filled quickly, 300 people, maybe more, representing every department in the Portland office. The noise level rose and fell in waves, conversations starting and stopping as people speculated about what was coming. Noah watched the door at the front of the room, waiting. At exactly 10 Hunt, Vivian Cross walked in. She looked nothing like the woman who had stood in his hallway 4 days ago. The transformation was complete. Power suit in deep charcoal, heels that added those 3 inches, hair pulled back in that architectural precision he remembered. She moved to the front of the room with the controlled grace of someone who had done this 1,000 times, and the noise died instantly, replaced by the particular silence that only real authority could command. "Good morning," she said, and her voice carried without effort, filling the space. "I'll keep this brief, because I know you all have work to do." She paused, her eyes scanning the room. For one heart-stopping moment, Noah thought she looked directly at him, but then her gaze moved on, and he wasn't sure if he'd imagined it. "As some of you may have heard through the rumor mill, and yes, I know about the rumor mill, I'm not as oblivious as some of you think." A ripple of nervous laughter. We are in discussions to acquire Meridian Data Solutions. For those unfamiliar, Meridian is a Seattle-based analytics firm with significant government contracts and proprietary technology that would complement our existing capabilities. The room buzzed with murmurs. Meridian was a name everyone knew, a competitor, a player, a company that had been circling some of the same contracts Whitmore had pursued. This acquisition, if successful, would make Whitmore Analytics the largest data services provider in the Pacific Northwest, Vivian continued. It would also mean significant changes for this company, expansion, reorganization, new opportunities. She paused. And yes, some uncertainty. I won't pretend otherwise. Noah watched her as she spoke, searching for some trace of the woman he'd seen on Saturday. But she was impeccable, untouchable, every inch the iron CEO that made people stammer in elevators. If she was carrying any of the vulnerabilities she'd shown him, it was buried so deep that even he couldn't find it. Over the coming weeks, you'll hear more details as we progress through due diligence, Vivian said. I've asked department heads to schedule team meetings to address specific questions. What I want you to know right now is this. I believe in this company. I believe in the people in this room. And whatever comes next, we will navigate it together. She stepped back from the podium, signaling the end of the formal announcement. Questions can be directed to your managers. Thank you for your time. The room erupted into conversation as people processed the news, but Noah stayed still, watching as Vivian spoke briefly with her executive team, nodded at something Collins from legal said, and then turned toward the exit. She was going to walk right past him. Noah's heart hammered as she approached, her heels clicking on the floor, her expression focused and distant. He prepared himself for her to pass without acknowledgement, for the return to normalcy he had been expecting. But at the last moment, she slowed. Her eyes met his, and something flickered in their gray-green depths. Recognition, awareness, a private message in a public space. Mr. Mercer, she said, her voice pitched just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. I'd like a word after this. Conference room 4B, 15 minutes. Then she was gone, sweeping past him and out the door, leaving Noah standing in a sea of curious glances and speculative whispers. Marcus appeared at his elbow, eyes wide. What was that about? I have no idea. The CEO just personally requested a meeting with you in front of everyone. That's not nothing, Noah. I'm sure it's about the audit work I did on the Henderson file last month. She probably has questions about the methodology. Right. Marcus didn't look convinced. The methodology, sure. Noah made his way to conference room 4B, his mind racing through possibilities. This could be professional. It probably was professional. Vivian was careful, strategic. She wouldn't risk her reputation or his job by calling attention to whatever had happened between them unless she had a legitimate cover story. But as he pushed open the door and stepped inside, he found that legitimate cover story waiting for him in the form of a thick folder on the conference table and Vivian standing by the window, looking out at the gray Portland skyline. Close the door, she said without turning around. He did. I need your help with something, she continued, still facing the window. And I need you to understand that what I'm about to ask you is completely professional, completely appropriate. There is nothing about this request that should make either of us uncomfortable. Okay. She turned then, and he saw the tension in her jaw, the careful control she was exercising. The Meridian acquisition involves some complex financial structures. Offshore entities, subsidiary relationships, the kind of thing that requires someone with very specific expertise to untangle. You have an entire accounting department. I have an accounting department full of people who are very good at their jobs and very bad at keeping secrets. She moved to the table, placed her hand on the folder. What I need is someone I can trust. Someone who won't talk. Someone who can look at these numbers and tell me if there's something hiding in them that I need to know about. Why me? The question hung between them, loaded with everything they weren't saying. Vivian met his eyes. You know why? I need to hear you say it. Because you're the only person in this building who has ever told me the truth without calculating what it would cost you. She paused. And because 3 days ago, you let me cry on your couch and didn't ask for anything in return. This feels like mixing things that shouldn't be mixed. I know. She pulled out a chair, sat down, and for just a moment he saw a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the woman underneath. I know it does. And if you want to say no, if you want to walk out of here and pretend Saturday never happened, I will respect that completely. Your job is safe either way. I would never. I know you wouldn't. Then help me understand what you're thinking. Noah pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. The folder lay between them like a demilitarized zone, professional territory that could justify this proximity. I'm thinking, he said slowly, that I spent all weekend trying to convince myself that what happened didn't matter, that it was a one-time thing, a moment of crisis, and we would both go back to our normal lives and forget about it. And I couldn't stop thinking about you. The words fell into the silence between them, honest and exposed. Vivian's breath caught. He saw it, the subtle hitch in her chest, the widening of her eyes. Noah, I'm not saying that to complicate things. I'm saying it because you asked me to tell you the truth. He leaned forward slightly. You showed up at my door in the middle of the night, and I saw you. Not the CEO, not the Iron Woman, you. And I can't unsee that. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. Neither do I. They sat there, on opposite sides of a conference table in a glass-walled room where anyone walking by could see them, and the air between them felt electric, dangerous, alive. The acquisition is real, Vivian finally said. The work I need you to do is real. I'm not making that up as an excuse to see you. I believe you. But I would be lying if I said that was the only reason I asked you to come here. She looked down at her hands, clasped on the table. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you either, about your apartment, about your daughter, about the way you handed me paper towels like it was the most normal thing in the world. It was normal. Not for me. She looked up. Nothing about that night was normal for me, and I don't know how to reconcile it with everything else. With this company, with my position, with all the reasons why what I'm feeling is a terrible idea. What are you feeling? The question was gentle, patient. Noah asked it the way he asked Lily about her day, not pushing, just offering space. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm feeling like I want to know you. Really know you. Not as my employee, not as the accountant who did good work on the Henderson file, but as the man who let me in when I was falling apart. She paused. I'm feeling like I want more mornings in your kitchen, more conversations that don't have agendas, more moments where someone looks at me like I'm a person instead of a problem. That sounds terrifying. It is. A small, surprised laugh escaped her. It's the most terrifying thing I've felt in years, and I've negotiated with hostile boards and fired people who tried to sabotage me. So what do we do? Vivian picked up the folder, held it out to him. Right now, we do the work. You look at these numbers, you tell me what you find, and we maintain professional distance while we figure out the rest. Noah took the folder, feeling its weight in his hands. And what about the rest? I don't know. She stood, smoothing her jacket, reassembling herself into the CEO. I need time to think. And I need you to understand that even if I want this, even if I want you, I can't risk everything I've built on something that might not work. I understand. Do you? She looked at him, and there was vulnerability there, hidden behind layers of composure. Do you understand what it would mean if this went wrong? For me, yes, but also for you? You have a daughter to think about, a job you need, a life that depends on stability. I know what I have to lose. And you're still willing to consider this? Noah stood, matching her posture, meeting her eyes. I'm willing to consider anything that doesn't require me to pretend Saturday didn't happen. Something shifted in her expression. Relief, maybe, or hope, or something too complicated to name. Read the file, she said. Let me know what you find. And Noah? Yes? Thank you. For everything. Then she turned and walked out, leaving him alone in the conference room with a folder full of numbers and a heart full of things he didn't know how to name. The week that followed was a study in controlled tension. Noah threw himself into the Meridian files, staying late, coming in early, finding solace in the concrete clarity of numbers. The work was complex, layers of corporate structure, international holdings, intercompany transactions that required careful tracing. But it was also fascinating, the kind of puzzle that reminded him why he'd become an accountant in the first place. He found things, discrepancies. Not fraud necessarily, but inconsistencies. Patterns that suggested Meridian's financials weren't quite as clean as they appeared. He documented everything, built spreadsheets, prepared a report that was thorough and professional and completely devoid of anything personal. But the personal was always there, humming beneath the surface. He saw Vivian in the hallways, in the elevator, across the cafeteria. Each time they exchanged the briefest of glances, professional acknowledgments that anyone watching would interpret as normal. But Noah felt each one like a touch, a private communication in a public language. On Wednesday, she called him back to conference room 4B. "Your preliminary findings," she said as he walked in. "I've read them." "And?" "You found problems I didn't know existed." She was standing by the window again, arms crossed. "The subsidiary in Dublin is carrying debt that doesn't appear on the consolidated statements. If I hadn't seen this before signing the acquisition agreement, you would have overpaid by at least $30 million. At least," she turned to face him, "you may have just saved this company a significant amount of money." "I was just doing my job." "No." She shook her head. "You were doing much more than your job. Most people would have flagged the obvious issues and moved on. You dug deeper. You asked questions no one else thought to ask. I wanted to do good work for you." The admission was too honest, too revealing. It hung in the air between them, and Noah watched Vivian process it, saw the way her expression softened before she caught herself. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "Really talk. Not here." "Then where?" "I don't know." She pressed her fingers to her temples, a gesture of frustration. "Everything I do is watched. My schedule is managed by 3 assistants. I can't just go somewhere." "You came to my apartment at 5 in the morning. That was different. That was desperation." "What's this?" She looked at him, and the answer was written in her eyes before she spoke. "This is hope," she whispered, "and hope is more dangerous than desperation." Noah took a step toward her, then stopped himself. The glass walls of the conference room suddenly felt like a cage, transparent, exposing, impossible to hide in. "Friday night," he said. "My neighbor watches Lily sometimes when I have to work late. I could tell her I have a project that needs attention." "You're asking me to come back to your apartment?" "I'm asking you to meet me somewhere we can actually talk, without worrying about who's watching." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. He could see her calculating, weighing risks, running scenarios the way she probably ran everything in her life. "What time?" she finally asked. 8. Lily goes to bed at 7:30. Mrs. Patterson can stay until 10. "I'll be there." The words were simple, practical, almost businesslike, but they both knew what they meant. The next 2 days felt like years. Noah moved through them on autopilot. Meetings, spreadsheets, a Thursday night where he read Lily the same bedtime story 3 times because his mind was elsewhere. She didn't seem to mind. She loved that story, the one about the little bear who got lost and found his way home. But Noah heard the words differently now, heard them as a metaphor for something he was only beginning to understand. Friday arrived with agonizing slowness. Noah left work at exactly 5 o'clock, which drew a raised eyebrow from Marcus, who had never seen him leave on time, and rushed through the evening routine. Dinner, bath time, the elaborate negotiations around which pajamas were acceptable. The story, the tuck-in, the lingering in the doorway until he was sure she was actually asleep. Mrs. Patterson arrived at 7:45, her gray hair tucked under a knit cap, her smile knowing in a way that made Noah wonder if he was less subtle than he thought. "You look nice," she said as he grabbed his jacket. "Big project, huh?" "Something like that." "Must be important. You never go out." "Mrs. Patterson." "I'm not judging, Noah." She patted his arm. "Everyone deserves a little happiness, even single dads who work too hard." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he just thanked her and headed downstairs to wait. The knock came at exactly 8:00. Noah opened the door to find Vivian standing in the hallway, looking utterly unlike herself. She was wearing jeans, dark, fitted, but still jeans, and a soft sweater in deep burgundy. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in waves he had never seen. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, or nearly so, and she looked younger, softer, more human than he had ever seen her in daylight. "Hi," she said, and the word came out uncertain, almost shy. "Hi. I wasn't sure what to wear to whatever this is." She gestured at herself. "I own approximately 200 suits and exactly 4 pairs of jeans. This seemed more appropriate." "You look beautiful." The compliment escaped before he could catch it, honest and unguarded. Vivian's cheeks flushed, actually flushed, and Noah felt something warm spread through his chest. "Can I come in?" "Please." She stepped inside, and the apartment seemed to transform around her presence the same way it had before, smaller somehow, but also more alive. She looked around, taking in the details she might have missed during her first visit, when everything had been blurred by tears. "It's cozy," she said. "I like it. It's a 2-bedroom apartment that's seen better days. It's a home." She turned to face him. "There's a difference." They stood there in his living room, separated by a few feet of worn carpet, and the air between them felt charged with possibility. "I brought wine," Vivian said, holding up a bottle he hadn't noticed. "I didn't know if you drink or what you like, so I just grabbed something from my collection. It's probably too expensive for the occasion." Noah took the bottle, glanced at the label. He didn't know wines, but he could read numbers, and the vintage suggested something he would never buy for himself. "I'll get glasses." He moved to the kitchen, grateful for the simple task, the few seconds to collect himself. When he returned with 2 wine glasses, mismatched because he didn't own a proper set, Vivian had settled onto the couch in the same spot where she'd sat 6 days ago. He poured the wine, handed her a glass, sat down in the armchair across from her, the same positions as before, the same charged silence. "I've been thinking," Vivian said, "about what you said, about not being able to pretend Saturday didn't happen. And I realize that I've spent my entire life pretending. Pretending I didn't care what people thought, pretending the comments didn't hurt, pretending that success was enough to fill all the empty spaces." She took a sip of wine. "And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of being untouchable. I'm tired of going home to an apartment that feels like a museum and wondering if this is all there is. What do you want instead?" "I don't know." She laughed softly. "That's the terrifying part. I've never let myself want anything that wasn't achievable, measurable, something I could work toward and eventually accomplish. But this, what I feel when I'm around you, it doesn't fit into any of those categories." "Tell me what you feel." "I feel..." She set down her wine glass, clasped her hands in her lap. "I feel seen. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel like someone is actually looking at me. Not at my title, not at my money, not at what I can do for them. At me. And it's terrifying and wonderful, and I don't know what to do with it." "You don't have to do anything with it. That's not how my brain works." "I know." Noah leaned forward. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe the thing you need right now isn't something you can plan or control. Maybe it's something you just have to let happen." Vivian was quiet, processing. He watched emotions play across her face, fear, longing, uncertainty, hope. "I looked you up," she finally said. "What?" "After that first night. After you let me cry on your couch and didn't ask for anything. I went home and I pulled your employee file." She looked almost ashamed. "I know that's invasive. I know I shouldn't have. But I needed to understand who you were." "What did you find?" "That you graduated summa cum laude from Portland State. That you've worked here for 4 years without a single complaint or disciplinary issue. That you've never once called in sick, even when your daughter was hospitalized for pneumonia last year." She paused. "That you're raising her alone. That your ex-wife lives in California now and hasn't visited in 2 years. Noah felt exposed, laid open by data she had no right to access. But strangely, he wasn't angry, just seen. "Is that everything?" "No." Vivian's voice dropped. "I also found out that 3 months after your wife left, you turned down a promotion, a significant promotion, with a substantial raise. You told HR you needed stability more than advancement. Lily was barely a year old. I couldn't take on more hours. I know. That's what your file said. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. But most people would have taken the promotion anyway, would have figured out childcare somehow, prioritized their career. You didn't. My daughter matters more than my career. See, she made a frustrated sound. That's exactly what I mean. You just say things like that, like they're obvious, like everyone would make that choice. Wouldn't they? No. The word was flat, certain. No, Noah, they wouldn't. I wouldn't have. 5 years ago, I would have taken that promotion and hired a nanny and convinced myself that being successful was the same as being present. That's what I did, actually, in my marriage. I prioritized everything except what mattered, and I'm still dealing with the consequences. What consequences? Vivian stood abruptly, moving to the window. She stared out at the rainy Portland evening, her arms wrapped around herself in that protective gesture he was beginning to recognize. My ex-husband wanted children, she said quietly. I kept putting it off. First, I needed to make partner. Then I needed to close this deal, build this company, prove myself to this person. There was always something more important, something that couldn't wait. She paused. By the time I was ready, or thought I was ready, he had already decided he didn't want them with me anymore. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was my fault. I made choices, and those choices had consequences. She turned to face him. But when I saw Lily that morning, when she walked out in her star pajamas and offered me her elephant, I realized what I had given up, what I had traded for corner offices and stock options and a reputation that makes people afraid of me. You could still have children. I'm 43. That's not... It's late, Noah. Maybe not impossible, but late. And more than that, I don't know if I even know how to be a mother. I don't know if I know how to be anything except what I've trained myself to be. Noah stood, moved toward her. She tensed as he approached, but didn't step away. The woman who showed up at my door, he said softly, wasn't a CEO. She wasn't a title or a reputation. She was someone who was hurting and scared and desperately human. That woman knows how to be more than what she's trained herself to be. You can't know that. I do know that. Because I saw her. He was close enough now to touch her, but he kept his hands at his sides. I saw you, Vivian. The real you. And she's not as lost as you think. Tears were forming in her eyes again, but she blinked them back. Why do you do that? Why do you say exactly the thing I need to hear? Because I'm not trying to impress you. I'm not trying to get anything from you. I'm just telling you what I see. And what do you see? I see someone who's been strong for so long that she's forgotten she's allowed to be weak. Someone who's been alone for so long that she doesn't trust kindness when it shows up. Someone who's terrified of wanting something she might not get. He paused. I see someone I want to know better, even knowing what it could cost you. Yes. The word hung between them, simple and certain. Vivian stared at him, and Noah watched her walls tremble, watched her reach for the arguments that would protect her, and find them insufficient. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to date someone I work with. I don't know how to build something personal while maintaining professional distance. I don't know how to let someone in without calculating the risk. Neither do I. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be honest. She laughed then, a real laugh, surprised out of her by his bluntness. It transformed her face, made her look younger, lighter, more like someone who remembered what joy felt like. You're impossible, she said. So I've been told. I'm serious. You're supposed to be intimidated by me. You're supposed to see dollar signs when you look at me, or ladder rungs, or whatever it is people usually see. You're supposed to want something. I do want something. What? Noah reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, the lightest possible touch. This, he said, whatever this is, whatever it becomes. I want a chance to find out. Vivian's breath caught. She leaned into his touch, just slightly, and the vulnerability of that small movement made something ache in his chest. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. I could hurt you. Without meaning to, without wanting to. I could get scared and push you away. I could let work take over and forget to be present. I could be everything Richard Thornton said I was. Too much, too intense, too difficult to love. Or you could be none of those things. Noah moved closer, closing the last inches of distance between them. Or you could be all of them, and I could love you anyway. You can't say that. You barely know me. I know enough. What do you know? I know that you came to my door when you could have gone anywhere. I know that you let my daughter see you cry. I know that you looked at my apartment, at my life, at everything I have that isn't impressive by your standards, and you didn't flinch. He paused. I know that you're standing here right now, terrified and hopeful and willing to try. That's enough for me. Vivian was crying now, tears sliding down her cheeks the way they had that first morning. But these tears were different, lighter, somehow, cleaner, the kind of tears that came with letting go. I don't deserve this, she whispered. That's not for you to decide. She laughed through her tears, shaking her head. There you go again, saying exactly the right thing. I'm just being honest. I know, that's what makes it so terrifying. They stood there, in Noah's modest living room, rain tapping against the windows, the wine forgotten on the coffee table. And slowly, carefully, Vivian reached up and covered his hand with her own, holding his touch against her cheek. Okay, she said. Okay, what? Okay, I want to try. I want to find out what this is, what it could be. I want to learn how to be the person you see when you look at me. She's already there. Maybe. Vivian smiled through her tears. But I might need help finding her. I've got time. Your daughter is asleep, and Mrs. Patterson is extremely reliable. The laugh that escaped Vivian was pure and real, the sound of someone remembering what happiness felt like. I should go, she said, but she didn't move. I have early meetings tomorrow. The Meridian deal doesn't negotiate itself. Okay. And we should probably establish some ground rules. About work, about communication, about how we're going to handle this without destroying both our careers. That sounds sensible. I'm very good at sensible. She stepped back finally, though her hand lingered on his for just a moment longer. It's the rest of it I'm still learning. Noah walked her to the door, feeling the strange electricity of an ending that was also a beginning. Vivian paused at the threshold, turned back to look at him. Thank you, she said, for letting me in. Again. My door is always open. Even at 5 a.m? Especially then. She smiled, a real smile, unguarded and warm. And then she was gone, her footsteps fading down the hallway, the door closing softly behind her. Noah stood in the entryway for a long moment, listening to the rain, feeling the weight of everything that had just shifted. Then he walked to the living room window and watched as Vivian emerged from the building, climbed into her car, and drove away into the wet Portland night. He thought about what she'd said, about being scared, about not knowing how to do this, about all the ways it could go wrong. He thought about Lily, sleeping peacefully down the hall, trusting him to make good decisions about their life. He thought about Elena, about the way love could fail, about the wreckage people could leave behind when they chose themselves over their families. And then he thought about Vivian's smile, about the hope in her eyes, about the way she'd leaned into his touch like someone reaching for something she'd forgotten she needed. Maybe this was a terrible idea. Maybe it would end in disaster, in heartbreak, in consequences neither of them could predict. But standing there in his living room with the taste of expensive wine on his lips and the echo of her laugh in his ears, Noah Mercer decided that some things were worth the risk, some things were worth hoping for, and some things, despite every logical argument against them, felt like they might just be the beginning of something real. The weeks that followed moved with a rhythm Noah had never experienced before, a careful choreography of professional distance and private closeness that required constant recalibration. At work, nothing changed. Vivian remained the Iron CEO, commanding boardrooms and negotiating the Meridian acquisition with the ruthless precision that had built her reputation. Noah remained the quiet accountant on the 4th floor, running numbers and attending meetings and exchanging pleasantries with colleagues who had no idea that their world had tilted on its axis. When they passed in the hallways, they nodded professionally. When they found themselves in the same elevator, They discussed weather and quarterly projections like strangers who happened to work for the same company. But outside those glass walls, in the stolen hours they carved from their separate lives, something entirely different was taking shape. They met in small ways at first. Coffee at a shop 15 minutes from the office, where no one from Whitmore would think to look. A walk through Washington Park on a Sunday morning, Lily between them, chattering about squirrels and demanding to be lifted over puddles. A quiet dinner at Noah's apartment after Lily went to bed. Takeout containers spread across the counter. Conversation flowing like water, finding its natural course. Vivian learned the rhythms of his life. The 6:47 alarm, the scramble for matching socks, the elaborate negotiations around breakfast foods. She learned that Lily refused to eat anything green unless it was hidden in something purple, that bedtime stories required exactly 3 readings of the chosen book, that Noah's patience was not performance but practice, years of showing up even when showing up was hard. And Noah learned about her. He learned that beneath the armor of power suits and corner offices, Vivian Cross was someone who had never been allowed to be small. Her father had been a factory foreman who believed daughters should be sons, who had pushed her toward achievement as a substitute for affection. Her mother had died when Vivian was 12, leaving her alone with a man who didn't know how to express love except through expectation. She had clawed her way through state schools and corporate ladders, proving herself over and over to people who kept moving the goalposts. "I was the first person in my family to graduate college," she told him one evening, sitting on his couch with her legs tucked beneath her, a glass of wine in her hands. "And when I walked across that stage, my father didn't clap. He just nodded, like I had finally done something that should have been obvious all along. That must have been lonely. I didn't know it was lonely. I thought it was normal." She stared into her wine. "I thought everyone's parents treated achievement as the baseline, something you were supposed to do rather than something worth celebrating. It wasn't until I got to the corporate world and saw how other people lived, people with families who showed up for them, who cheered for them, that I realized what I'd missed." "Is that why you worked so hard? To prove something to him?" "At first. But he died when I was 32 and I kept working just as hard. By then it wasn't about him anymore, it was just who I was. I didn't know how to be anyone else." Noah reached over and took her hand, feeling the tension in her fingers slowly release. "You're learning," he said. "Am I?" She laughed softly. "Some days I feel like I'm just pretending, going through the motions of being a person instead of actually being one. That's how everyone feels. The secret is that nobody knows what they're doing. We're all just making it up as we go." "You don't seem like you're making it up." "Just trust me, I am." He squeezed her hand. "But I've gotten good at pretending I'm not." She smiled at that. A real smile, the kind that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Noah was learning to treasure those smiles, to collect them like precious stones. They were rare, those unguarded moments, but they were becoming less rare with each passing week. The Meridian acquisition moved forward, consuming most of Vivian's waking hours. Noah watched from his careful distance as she navigated board meetings and stakeholder calls, as she addressed concerns from employees worried about their jobs, as she managed 1,000 competing priorities with the kind of competence that made him understand why people feared her. But she always found time. Sometimes it was just a text message late at night, after Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet. "Thinking about you." Sometimes it was a phone call on her drive home, her voice tired but warm. "Tell me something ordinary. Tell me what you had for dinner." Sometimes it was a carefully scheduled meeting in conference room 4B, where they pretended to discuss financial projections while their knees touched beneath the table. 3 weeks after that Friday night conversation, Vivian came to dinner at Noah's apartment and didn't leave. It wasn't planned. They had eaten Thai food from the place down the street, watched a movie with the volume low, talked about nothing and everything. And when the clock crept past midnight and Noah mentioned that Mrs. Patterson had gone home hours ago, Vivian had simply looked at him and said, "I don't want to go." "Then don't." She stayed in his bed that night, curled against him in the darkness, her breathing eventually evening out into sleep. Noah lay awake for a long time, feeling the warmth of her, the realness of her. This woman who commanded boardrooms, sleeping peacefully in his modest bedroom with its second-hand furniture and the crack in the ceiling he kept meaning to fix. In the morning, she woke before Lily, some internal clock trained by decades of early meetings, and slipped out before the apartment stirred. But she left a note on his pillow, written on a piece of paper she'd torn from the notebook by his bed. "Thank you for the ordinary night, V." He kept that note in his wallet, folded small, a private talisman against the uncertainty that still lurked at the edges of everything they were building. The transition was gradual, careful, deliberate. Vivian began staying over once a week, then twice. She kept a toothbrush in his bathroom, a change of clothes in his closet. Lily, with the adaptability of young children, accepted her presence without question. The sad lady had become a fixture of their lives, someone who showed up for breakfast sometimes, who knew how to braid hair badly but enthusiastically, who always asked about school and actually listened to the answers. "Daddy," Lily asked one Saturday morning as Vivian was in the kitchen attempting to make pancakes that didn't look like abstract art, "is Vivian your girlfriend?" Noah paused, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. Through the doorway, he could see Vivian freeze at the stove, her back suddenly rigid. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because she sleeps here sometimes, and you smile different when she's here." Lily shrugged with the uncomplicated logic of a 4-year-old. "Madison at school says her mommy has a boyfriend, and he sleeps at their house too." Noah glanced at Vivian, who had turned from the stove, her expression caught somewhere between terror and hope. "Yes," Noah said finally. "Vivian is my girlfriend. Is that okay with you?" Lily considered this with appropriate solemnity. "Does that mean she'll keep making pancakes? Because she's not very good at it." The tension broke with laughter. Vivian's startled, Noah's relieved, Lily's delighted at having said something apparently hilarious. "I'm working on it," Vivian called from the kitchen. "These ones might actually be edible." "That's what you said last time," Lily pointed out. "I'm an optimist." "What's an optimist?" "Someone who keeps trying even when the pancakes keep coming out wrong." Lily nodded sagely. "Daddy says practice makes perfect." "Your daddy is a very smart man." George said. Later, after the pancakes had been eaten, the edible ones, anyway, and Lily had gone to her room to play with her blocks, Vivian sat with Noah on the couch, her head on his shoulder, her hand intertwined with his. "She asked if I was your girlfriend," Vivian said quietly. "I know, I was there." "You said yes. Was I wrong?" She was silent for a moment. "No, I've never been someone's girlfriend before." "Not really. I was someone's wife, but that was different. That was a merger, not a relationship." "What's the difference?" "A merger is strategic. You calculate the benefits, negotiate the terms, sign the documents. Both parties get something they want, and if it stops being beneficial, you dissolve the arrangement." She paused. "This doesn't feel like that. This feels like what?" "Messy. Unpredictable. Like something I can't control." She looked up at him. "I'm not used to wanting something I can't control." "Is that bad?" "I don't know yet." She smiled slightly. "Ask me in a year." "I will." "Promise?" "Promise." The all-hands meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late October, 6 weeks after that first knock on Noah's door. The Meridian acquisition had closed 3 days earlier, making Whitmore Analytics the largest data services provider in the Pacific Northwest, exactly as Vivian had promised. The company was buzzing with energy, with anxiety, with the particular electricity of major change. Noah arrived early, taking his usual spot near the back of the conference center. The room filled around him. Colleagues he'd worked with for years, new faces from the Meridian integration, executives who had flown in from satellite offices. Everyone was speculating about what came next, about reorganizations and new opportunities and potential layoffs. Vivian entered at exactly 10 o'clock, commanding the room with her presence the way she always did. She was wearing one of her signature suits, charcoal with subtle pinstripes, her hair perfect, her expression composed. No one looking at her would have any idea that she'd left Noah's apartment at 6 a.m., that she'd kissed him goodbye while Lily was still sleeping, that she'd whispered, "I'll see you out there," against his lips. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice carrying clearly. I know the past few weeks have been intense, and I appreciate your patience and hard work as we've completed this acquisition. She talked about the integration plans, the timeline, the opportunities ahead. She talked about the commitment to existing employees, the new resources available, the vision for the company's future. It was a good speech, clear, confident, reassuring. The room relaxed incrementally as she spoke, but Noah noticed something different in her demeanor. A tension beneath the composure, a slight tremor in her hands that only someone watching very closely would catch. Before we conclude, Vivian said, I have a personal announcement to make. The room went very still. As of today, I am stepping down as CEO of Whitmore Analytics. The silence that followed was absolute. 300 people stopped breathing simultaneously. Don't panic, Vivian continued, and there was a hint of her characteristic wryness in her voice. I'm not dying, and I'm not being pushed out. This is my decision, made for my own reasons, and I'm confident that the leadership transition will be seamless. Murmurs began rippling through the crowd. Noah felt his heart hammering against his ribs. She hadn't told him. She hadn't said a word. I've spent the last 15 years building this company, Vivian said. I've given it everything I had, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished together. She paused, and for just a moment, her eyes found Noah's across the crowded room. But I've recently been reminded that there's more to life than quarterly projections and market share, that success means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with. The murmurs intensified. People were looking around, trying to understand what was happening. I'll be launching a consulting firm focused on helping other companies navigate the kind of challenges we've overcome here. I'll still be involved with Whitmore as a board advisor, but the day-to-day leadership will transfer to Sarah Chen, our current COO, who has more than earned this opportunity. She spoke for a few more minutes, logistics, transitions, reassurances, but Noah barely heard any of it. His mind was spinning, trying to process what she had done, what it meant, what it changed. When the meeting ended, the room erupted into chaos, people clustering, talking, some celebrating, some panicking. Noah stayed in his seat, waiting, watching as Vivian shook hands and answered questions and gradually made her way toward the exit. She didn't acknowledge him publicly. She walked past without a glance, maintaining the professional distance they had both agreed was necessary. But as she passed, her hand brushed his shoulder, the lightest possible touch, and he felt a folded piece of paper slip into his jacket pocket. He waited until the crowd had thinned before pulling it out. Conference room 4B, 20 minutes. When Noah pushed open the door to 4B, Vivian was already there, standing by the window, arms wrapped around herself in that protective gesture he knew so well. But she turned when she heard him enter, and her expression was different from anything he'd seen before, vulnerable and hopeful and terrified all at once. You didn't tell me, he said. I couldn't. I needed to do it without warning, without anyone trying to talk me out of it. She took a breath. Without giving myself time to change my mind. Why? Why did I step down? She laughed softly. Because I realized something these past few weeks. I realized that I was falling in love with you, and as long as I was your CEO, that love would always be complicated. There would always be whispers about power dynamics, about favoritism, about whether our relationship was appropriate. You would always be someone who worked for me, and I would always be someone who had authority over your career. That didn't matter to me. It mattered to me. She crossed the room toward him. I wanted to love you freely, Noah. Without calculations, without complications, without the shadow of professional obligation hanging over everything. And the only way to do that was to remove the obstacle. So you gave up your company. I gave up a job. She reached out, took his hands in hers. There's a difference. The company will survive without me. It might even thrive. Sarah is brilliant, maybe better suited to this next phase than I am. And She paused, her voice catching. I want something different now. I want what you have, what you've built. What have I built? A life. A real life with a child who loves you and an apartment that feels like home and relationships that aren't transactional. Her eyes glistened. I want lazy Sunday mornings and burnt pancakes and someone who looks at me like I'm a person, not a title. I want to know what it feels like to be chosen, not for what I can do, but for who I am. Vivian, you don't have to say anything. I know this is a lot. I know I just changed everything without asking you first, and that's probably exactly the kind of controlling behavior I'm supposed to be unlearning." She laughed through her tears. "I'm still figuring this out. I'm still learning how to be human instead of just successful. But I know that whatever comes next, I want to figure it out with you." Noah stared at her. This woman who had terrified boardrooms, who had built an empire through sheer force of will, who was standing in front of him crying because she wanted burnt pancakes and Sunday mornings. "You're impossible," he said. "So I've been told. You just gave up everything you've worked for." "No." She shook her head. "I gave up the things I thought I wanted. The things I was supposed to want." She squeezed his hands. "What I want, what I really want, is standing right in front of me." The kiss that followed was different from the careful, measured kisses they had shared before. This was the kiss of two people who had stopped calculating, stopped protecting themselves, stopped holding back. It was the kiss of beginning. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Vivian rested her forehead against his. "So what happens now?" she whispered. "Now we go back to work like nothing happened, because we're still in a conference room with glass walls and 300 people who are very curious about why the CEO just resigned." She laughed, that real laugh, unguarded and warm. "That's very practical of you. I have a child. Practical is survival." "And after work?" "After work, you come to my apartment. We order pizza because neither of us is up for cooking. We watch Lily's favorite movie for the 100th time. And then, when she's asleep, we talk about what this actually looks like, what we're building, what we want it to become." "That sounds—" She searched for the word. "Ordinary." "Perfect." She kissed him again, softly. "It sounds perfect." The transition was both smoother and more complicated than Noah had expected. Vivian moved through the next month with her characteristic efficiency, handling the leadership transition, establishing her consulting firm, extricating herself from the day-to-day operations of the company she had built. She was still on the board, still involved in major decisions, but the texture of her days changed dramatically. And with that change came something Noah had never expected: presence. Vivian began showing up. Not just physically, she had done that before, but emotionally, completely. She picked Lily up from preschool on days when Noah had late meetings. She learned the names of Lily's friends, the themes of her current obsessions, the particular rhythm of her moods. She mastered the art of the grilled cheese sandwich, though pancakes remained her nemesis, and discovered that she had strong opinions about which Disney movies were actually good. "Moana is clearly superior to Frozen," she declared one evening, after what Lily called a movie marathon, and Vivian called educational research. "The protagonist has agency, the music is better, and there's no unnecessary romantic subplot." "I like Frozen," Lily said, unconvinced. "The snowman is annoying." "Olaf is funny." "We may have to agree to disagree." "What does that mean?" "It means I think you're wrong, but I love you anyway." The words slipped out easily, naturally, as if Vivian had been saying them her whole life. Lily accepted them with the casual trust of childhood, but Noah saw the way Vivian's eyes widened slightly, the way she caught herself after the fact, surprised by her own honesty. Later, after Lily was asleep, Vivian sat with Noah on the couch, her legs draped over his lap, her head against his shoulder. "I said I loved her," she murmured. "I noticed." "I didn't plan to say that." "The best things are usually unplanned." She was quiet for a moment. "Is it too fast? We've only been doing this for a couple of months. I don't want to promise her something and then disappear. I don't want to be someone else who leaves." "Are you planning to leave?" "No." The word was immediate, certain. "No, I'm not planning to leave. But I didn't plan to leave my marriage either, and that happened anyway." "What happened to your marriage?" It was the first time he'd asked directly. Vivian had mentioned her ex-husband in passing. His name was Daniel, he was an investment banker, the divorce had been finalized 8 months ago, but she'd never talked about the details. Noah had let her keep that privacy, waiting until she was ready. Now she shifted slightly, not pulling away but settling deeper against him. "We got married because it made sense," she said. "Two ambitious people, compatible backgrounds, similar goals. On paper, we were perfect. In practice, we were two strangers living parallel lives in the same house. That sounds lonely. It was, but I didn't realize it at the time. I thought that was just how marriage worked. You had your career, your spouse had theirs, you came together for social events and holidays and the occasional dinner. She laughed softly. It took me years to realize that other people actually talked to each other, actually wanted to spend time together. When did you realize? When I found out he was having an affair. She said it flatly, without drama. He'd been seeing someone for almost 2 years, a junior associate at his firm. She was 28, adoring, uncomplicated, everything I wasn't. I'm sorry. Don't be. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. The worst part was realizing I didn't care. She looked up at him. He came to me, confessed, expected me to fall apart, and I felt nothing, just a kind of tired acceptance, like something I'd been waiting for had finally happened. What did you do? I thanked him for his honesty, called my lawyer, and had separation papers drawn up by the end of the week. She smiled grimly. He was surprised. I think he expected drama, passion, some evidence that our marriage had actually mattered to me. Instead, I treated it like a business negotiation, which, in retrospect, is probably what it had always been. And now? Now I'm terrified. She sat up, turning to face him fully. Because this, what we have, it's not a business negotiation. I can't predict the outcomes or calculate the risks. I can't protect myself by not caring. Would you want to? No. The word was quiet, vulnerable. That's the terrifying part. I don't want to protect myself from this. I want to feel all of it, even the parts that might hurt. Noah reached out, cupped her face in his hands. I can't promise you it won't hurt. I can't promise you anything, really, except that I'll try. Every day I'll try to be someone worth this risk. You already are. Then trust that. Trust me. I'm trying. She covered his hands with hers. I'm trying so hard, Noah, but I've never been good at trust. I've never been good at letting someone else hold something precious. What's precious? My heart. Her voice broke slightly on the word. I didn't even know I still had one until you found it. He kissed her then, slow and tender, trying to communicate everything he felt in that simple gesture. When they pulled apart, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. This is real, isn't it? She whispered. This isn't some dream I'm going to wake up from? It's real. Promise? Promise. The holiday season approached with its particular blend of chaos and magic. Lily was consumed with anticipation, counting down days on a paper chain she'd made at school, revising her wish list daily, interrogating Noah about whether Santa knew she'd moved apartments. He knows everything, Noah assured her. It's kind of his job. But what if he goes to the old apartment? What if he doesn't know we live here now? We'll leave him extra cookies. And a note with our new address, just in case. This seemed to satisfy her, though she insisted on writing the note herself, a masterpiece of purple crayon and creative spelling that Noah photographed before placing it carefully by the fireplace they didn't have. He improvised a magic mailbox from a shoebox, explaining that Santa had special ways of receiving messages from children who lived in apartments. Vivian watched these elaborate negotiations with an expression Noah couldn't quite read. What? He asked, after Lily had gone to bed and they were cleaning up the remains of dinner. Nothing. She was loading the dishwasher, her movements careful and precise. I was just thinking about how different this is from my childhood. Different how? My father didn't believe in lying to children. No Santa, no Easter Bunny, no Tooth Fairy. He said it was setting them up for disappointment when they discovered the truth. That's, practical. It was lonely. She closed the dishwasher, leaned against the counter. I remember going to school and listening to other kids talk about what Santa brought them, and I had to pretend I believed too, even though I knew it wasn't real. It felt like being on the outside of something everyone else got to experience. You never believed? I never had the chance to believe. And I think, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I think that's why I have such a hard time with hope now. Because I learned early that the good things people promise you aren't real. That if you want something, you have to make it happen yourself. Noah moved toward her, wrapped his arms around her waist. What would you have asked Santa for? If you could have believed? She was quiet for a long moment, her head resting against his chest. A mother, she finally said. I would have asked for my mother back. The rawness of the admission cut through him. He held her tighter, feeling the tension in her shoulders, the controlled steadiness of her breathing. I'm sorry, he said. It was a long time ago. That doesn't mean it stopped hurting. No. She pulled back slightly, looked up at him. It doesn't, but being here with you and Lily, watching you create magic for her, it helps. It feels like getting to experience something I missed the first time around. Then let's give you the full experience. What do you mean? I mean, let's do the holiday properly, together. You can help us decorate the tree, make cookies, watch terrible Christmas movies until we can recite them from memory. He paused. You can be part of this family, Vivian, if you want to be. The word hung in the air between them. Family. Vivian's eyes filled with tears, not the controlled tears of their early conversations, but something messier, more overwhelming. I want to be, she whispered. I want that more than I've ever wanted anything. Then it's yours. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and full of something that felt like finally. When they broke apart, both breathless, she laughed through her tears. This is ridiculous, she said. I'm a 43-year-old woman crying about Santa Claus. You're a 43-year-old woman who's finally letting herself have what she wanted. Which is what? Magic? Fairy tales? Love. Noah brushed a tear from her cheek. You're letting yourself have love. The words settled between them, true and terrifying and wonderful. I love you, Vivian said, and her voice was steady now, certain. I've been trying to figure out when to say it, how to say it, whether it was too soon or too much. But I'm done calculating. I love you, Noah. I love your daughter. I love this apartment and these terrible pancakes and the way you look at me like I'm worth something beyond what I can achieve. You are worth something beyond what you can achieve. You always were. You just needed someone to help you see it. And you see it? Every day. She started crying again, and this time she didn't try to stop. Noah held her in his modest kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of a life she was learning to be part of. Lily's drawings on the refrigerator, the chipped coffee mugs they used every morning, the ordinary magic of a home that was becoming theirs. And for the first time since that rainy morning when she'd knocked on his door, Vivian Cross let herself believe that the good things she'd been promised might actually be real. The tree they chose was slightly too tall for the apartment. Noah had warned Vivian about this in the lot, standing among rows of Douglas firs while Lily darted between them like a pinball, touching every branch within reach. But Vivian had insisted that this particular tree, 8 feet of dense, fragrant needles with a perfect conical shape, was the one. She had looked at it with an expression Noah recognized, the same focused determination she probably brought to hostile board negotiations. It won't fit, he said gently. We'll make it fit. The ceiling is 7.5 feet. Then we'll trim the top. That will ruin the shape. Noah. She turned to face him, and there was something in her eyes that made him stop arguing. I've never picked out a Christmas tree before. My father thought they were fire hazards, and Daniel and I always had one delivered by a decorator. Pre-trimmed, pre-lit, placed in the foyer by strangers. She touched one of the branches, her fingers gentle against the needles. I want this one. I want to bring it home and struggle with it and make it work. So they bought the too-tall tree, wrestled it into the elevator while their neighbors watched with amusement, and spent 45 minutes trying to get it through Noah's front door without leaving a trail of needles across the hallway. By the time it was standing in the corner of the living room, tilting slightly because the floor wasn't quite level, all 3 of them were covered in sap and laughing so hard that Mrs. Patterson knocked on the wall to see if everything was okay. It's perfect, Lily declared, staring up at the tree that brushed the ceiling and blocked most of the window. It's enormous, Noah said. It's ours, Vivian added, and the word carried a weight that had nothing to do with Christmas decorations. They decorated it together over the course of 3 evenings, adding ornaments in no particular order or design scheme. Lily insisted on hanging her favorites at eye level, creating a dense cluster of sparkly snowflakes and cartoon characters around the bottom third of the tree. Vivian contributed a set of elegant glass balls she'd found at a boutique downtown, positioning them carefully before Lily rearranged them into what she called a better pattern. Noah added the ornaments from his childhood, battered, mismatched, each one carrying a memory his parents had pressed into his hands before they passed. "This is chaos," Vivian observed on the third night, stepping back to assess their work. "That's the point," Noah said. "It's supposed to tell a story. Our story. Our story involves a lot of glitter, apparently." Lily's influence. "I'm not complaining." Vivian slipped her arm around his waist, leaning against him. "I've never had a tree that told a story before. Mine were always perfect. Coordinated colors, professional arrangements, the kind of thing you'd see in a magazine." She paused. "They were beautiful, but they didn't mean anything." "And this one?" "This one means everything." The holidays themselves passed in a blur of warmth and chaos. There were cookies to bake, most of them misshapen, some of them burnt, all of them consumed with enthusiasm, and presents to wrap and carols to sing badly, while Lily insisted they were doing it wrong. There was Christmas Eve dinner at Noah's apartment, just the three of them, eating lasagna because Lily had decided that was her new favorite food and wouldn't hear of turkey or ham. There was the elaborate ritual of leaving cookies for Santa and carrots for the reindeer, Vivian watching with wet eyes as Noah orchestrated the magic with practiced ease. And there was Christmas morning. Lily woke at 5:47. "Earlier than usual," Noah whispered to Vivian, and burst into their bedroom with the energy of a small hurricane. "He came. Santa came. The cookies are gone and there's presents." Vivian sat up, blinking against the darkness, her hair a tangled mess from sleep. She looked, Noah thought, absolutely beautiful. "Go on," he said, nudging her. "This is the best part." They followed Lily to the living room, where the tree glowed with the lights they'd left on overnight, and a small mountain of presents waited beneath the branches. Lily dove in with the single-minded focus of a 4-year-old on Christmas morning, tearing paper and shrieking with delight at each revealed treasure. But it was Vivian's face Noah kept watching. She was sitting on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, a cup of coffee warming her hands. And as she watched Lily tear through her presents, as she exclaimed over each gift and helped read the tags, and gathered discarded wrapping paper into neat piles, something shifted in her expression. The careful composure she usually maintained, even in private, even when she thought no one was watching, finally fully dissolved. She looked happy. Not successful, not accomplished, not victorious, just happy. "This one's for you," Lily announced, dragging a wrapped box across the carpet. "From me and Daddy." Vivian looked at Noah, surprised. "You didn't have to—" "Open it," Lily commanded, with all the authority of a small empress. Vivian carefully unwrapped the paper, so different from Lily's enthusiastic shredding, and lifted the lid of the box inside. For a moment she just stared at its contents, her expression unreadable. "It's a photo album," Lily explained, clearly unable to contain the secret any longer. "Of us. Me and you and Daddy. From all the times we did stuff together." Vivian lifted the album from the box with trembling hands. She opened it to the first page, and Noah watched her face as she took in the photographs he'd been secretly collecting for weeks. Vivian and Lily at the park, feeding ducks. The three of them at the Christmas tree lot, covered in sap. Vivian attempting pancakes while Lily supervised. Small moments, ordinary moments, the kinds of moments that built a life. "There's more," Lily said impatiently. "Keep looking." Vivian turned the pages slowly, her eyes moving over each image like she was memorizing them. Halfway through the album, she stopped. "Oh," she breathed. Noah knew which picture she'd reached, the one Mrs. Patterson had taken without them knowing, a candid shot through the kitchen doorway. Noah was washing dishes while Vivian dried, both of them laughing at something Lily had said. They looked, in that frozen moment, like a family. "Do you like it?" Lily asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. "Daddy said you would like it, but I wasn't sure because you have lots of fancy things, and this is just pictures." "Lily." Vivian's voice cracked on the name. "This is the best present anyone has ever given me." "Really?" "Really." She set the album down carefully, then opened her arms. Can I have a hug? Lily launched herself at Vivian with the full-body commitment of childhood, nearly knocking her backward on the couch. Vivian caught her, held her tight, and met Noah's eyes over the top of Lily's head. "Thank you," she mouthed. He just smiled, feeling something in his chest expand to make room for this moment, this woman, this life they were building together. After the presents were opened and breakfast was consumed, French toast, which Vivian had actually mastered, and Lily was occupied with her new toys in the corner, Noah pulled Vivian aside. "I have one more thing for you." "Noah, the album was already too much. It's not a present, exactly." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "It's more of a proposition." Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. "That sounds ominous." "Just open it." She took the envelope, slid her finger under the flap, and extracted the single piece of paper inside. Noah watched her read it, watched her eyebrows rise, watched her look up at him with an expression of pure confusion. "This is a lease agreement." "It's a lease agreement for a 3-bedroom apartment, 1 floor up from this one." "I don't understand." "I've been thinking about space," Noah said carefully, "about how this apartment was perfect for me and Lily, but it's getting crowded with 3 people, about how you deserve a closet that's bigger than a shoebox, and Lily deserves a room she doesn't have to share with my home office." "You want to move?" "I want us to move. Together." He took her hands in his. "I know it's fast. I know we've only been doing this for a few months. But you're here most nights anyway, and Lily asks every morning if you're going to be at breakfast, and I'm tired of pretending we're not already a family." "Noah, you don't have to say yes. You don't have to decide anything right now. I just wanted you to know that I'm not afraid of this. I'm not trying to protect myself from getting hurt or keeping one foot out the door." He squeezed her hands. "I'm all in, Vivian. I have been since the moment you knocked on my door." She was crying again. She did that more easily now, her emotional armor weakening with each passing day, but the tears were accompanied by a smile so bright it transformed her face. "A 3-bedroom apartment," she repeated, "with actual closet space, and a bathtub that doesn't make concerning noises." "You hate this apartment that much?" "I love this apartment. It's been my home for years." He paused. "But home isn't about square footage or plumbing. Home is about who you share it with, and I want to share it with you." Vivian looked down at the lease agreement in her hands, then back up at Noah, then over at Lily, who was happily building something elaborate with her new blocks. "Yes," she said. "Yes?" "Yes, I want to move with you. Yes, I want to build something together. Yes, I want to be your family. Officially, completely. Without any more pretending." She laughed through her tears. "Yes to all of it, Noah. Yes to everything." He kissed her then, Christmas morning sunshine streaming through the windows, their 2-tall tree glowing in the corner, their daughter, humming to herself across the room. The move happened in early January, a chaotic weekend of boxes and furniture, and Lily's very specific opinions about where everything should go. Vivian had insisted on hiring movers. "I'm not carrying a couch up 3 flights of stairs, Noah. I don't care how character building you think it is." But she'd also insisted on doing the actual unpacking herself. She wanted to touch everything, she explained. She wanted to know where things were, to feel like she'd built this space rather than just moved into it. "You're very particular about this," Noah observed, watching her arrange books on a shelf by some system he couldn't decipher. "I spent 20 years living in spaces that other people decorated. Apartments that looked like they came from catalogs, houses that could have belonged to anyone." She placed another book carefully. "I want this to be ours. Really ours." "It already is." "I know, but I want to feel it." The new apartment was larger, but no less modest. Noah had been clear that he wouldn't let Vivian pay for something he couldn't afford on his own salary. This had led to their first real argument. Vivian insisting that finances shouldn't be kept separate when they were building a life together, Noah pushing back with stubborn pride that had more to do with history than logic. They'd compromised eventually. Vivian paid the difference between what Noah could afford and what the new apartment cost, with the understanding that it was a loan, though they both knew she'd never let him pay it back. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was theirs, and that mattered more than perfection. Lily's room was the first to be finished. They painted it together on a Saturday afternoon, a soft lavender that she had chosen herself after much deliberation. Vivian, it turned out, was terrible at painting. She got more on herself than on the walls, but she threw herself into the task with an enthusiasm that made up for her lack of skill. "You have paint in your hair," Noah told her, trying not to laugh. "I'm aware." "And on your face." "Also aware." "And somehow on the ceiling, even though we weren't painting the ceiling." Vivian looked up, saw the splash of lavender against the white, and burst out laughing. It was a sound Noah still treasured, rare and genuine and utterly unlike the controlled corporate laugh she used in professional settings. "I told you I'm not good at this," she said. "You're perfect at this." "I'm literally covered in paint." "Perfect," he repeated, crossing the room to kiss her, paint and all. The consulting firm launched in February, 3 months after Vivian's resignation from Whitmore. She'd spent the intervening weeks building the infrastructure, recruiting a small team, establishing processes, reaching out to potential clients who valued her expertise and track record. It was smaller than what she'd left behind, more manageable, designed around a life rather than consuming one. "I had 17 meetings this week," she reported one evening, kicking off her heels by the door. 17. That's more than I had some months at Whitmore. Is that good or bad? Both. Good because the business is growing faster than I projected. Bad because I keep forgetting that I'm supposed to have boundaries now. She collapsed onto the couch, letting her head fall back. Old habits. Noah sat down beside her, pulled her feet into his lap, began rubbing them the way he'd learned she liked. "Tell me about the meetings." 3 potential clients, 2 existing client check-ins, 4 team coordination sessions, and a whole lot of administrative things I keep forgetting to delegate. She groaned as he hit a particularly tight spot. "How do you do that?" "Years of practice. Lily used to get growing pains." "You're remarkably good at taking care of people." "That's literally my job. As your partner, I mean, taking care of you." She opened one eye to look at him. "That goes both ways, you know." "I know." "I want to take care of you too. I want to be good at this." "You're good at this." "I burned dinner last night." "That's not a measure of care. That's a measure of cooking skill, which you openly admit you don't have." "I'm trying to acquire it." "I know, and the effort is the point." He squeezed her foot gently. "You show up every day, Vivian. You learn new things and make mistakes and try again. That's what caring looks like." She was quiet for a moment, absorbing his words. Then she sat up, turned to face him properly. "I've been thinking about something." "Okay." "About Lily. About her mother." Noah tensed slightly, an automatic response to the topic he rarely discussed. "What about her?" "You've never really told me the whole story. I know she left. I know it's been 2 years, but..." Vivian hesitated. "I feel like I need to understand. If I'm going to be part of Lily's life, really part of it, I need to know what happened." He was silent for a long moment, the familiar weight of that history pressing against his chest. Then he exhaled slowly. "Elena and I met in college," he began. "She was everything I wasn't, spontaneous, adventurous, the kind of person who booked flights on impulse and changed her major 3 times. I was steady. She was chaos. We balanced each other out, or at least that's what we told ourselves." "What happened?" "We got married too young, had Lily too young, and Elena..." He paused, searching for the right words. "She wasn't ready to be a mother. She thought she was. She wanted to be. But when Lily was born, something shifted. The reality of it. The endless demands, the loss of freedom. The way your entire identity gets swallowed by this tiny person who needs you. It broke something in her." "Postpartum depression?" "That's what the doctors said. She got treatment, medication, therapy. It helped, but it didn't change the fundamental problem. Elena didn't want the life we'd built. She wanted the life she'd imagined before Lily existed." His voice caught slightly. "When Lily was 8 months old, Elena told me she was leaving. She'd met someone without kids, without responsibilities, someone who could give her back the freedom she'd lost." "She just left?" "She said goodbye to Lily, held her for a long time, cried, promised to visit, and then she walked out the door and didn't come back." Noah's jaw tightened. "She's called maybe 5 times in 2 years, sent a few cards. Lily barely remembers her. Vivian reached out, took his hand in both of hers. I'm so sorry. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because you need to understand what it means to be in Lily's life. He met her eyes directly. She's already lost one mother. I can't let her lose another. You won't have to. Vivian, I mean it. Her grip on his hand tightened. I know I'm not her mother. I'm not trying to replace Elena. But whatever I am to Lily, whatever she needs me to be, I'm not leaving. Not ever. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Because I've already made that choice. She brought his hand to her lips, kissed his knuckles. I chose you, Noah. Both of you. And I don't make choices I'm not prepared to honor. The words settled into him like stones dropped into still water, rippling outward, changing the shape of everything they touched. I believe you, he said, and he meant it. Good. She leaned forward, kissed him softly. Now tell me about the 5 calls Elena made. I want to know everything. So he told her. The first call, 3 months after Elena left, full of tears and apologies and promises she didn't keep. The second call, on Lily's first birthday, awkward and stilted, Elena not knowing what to say to a child who couldn't respond. The third and fourth calls, progressively shorter, progressively more distant, the guilt fading into absence. The fifth call, 6 months ago, Elena announcing she was getting married again to the man she'd left Noah for, and asking if Lily could be the flower girl. I said no, Noah admitted. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe I should have let Lily decide, or at least given Elena a chance, but I couldn't. His voice broke. I couldn't watch my daughter dress up for her mother's wedding to the man who took her away. That wasn't wrong, Vivian said firmly. That was protecting your child. Was it? Or was it punishing Elena? Both, maybe. And both can be true. She cupped his face in her hands. You're allowed to have complicated feelings about this, Noah. You're allowed to be angry and hurt and protective all at once. That's what being a parent is. I thought you'd never been a parent before. I haven't, but I'm learning. And the first thing I've learned is that there are no perfect choices. Just choices you make with love and choices you make without it. She smiled slightly. You make all of yours with love. That's what matters. The spring arrived slowly, Portland shaking off its gray winter coat in gradual increments. Cherry blossoms appeared on the trees outside their new apartment, pink and white against the still cloudy sky. Lily celebrated her 5th birthday with a party at the park. 7 kids, 2 tired parents, and Vivian gamely running a beanbag toss despite having no idea what she was doing. You're doing great, Noah assured her, watching from the picnic table. I'm doing terribly. That child just hit me in the face with a beanbag. That's Tommy. He has aim issues. He has accuracy issues. His aim was perfect. Noah laughed, pulling her down beside him. This is what kids' parties are like. Chaos and questionable food and going home exhausted. I had no idea. Now you do. She leaned against him, watching Lily chase her friends across the grass. She's happy. She is. Is that because of you or in spite of you? Probably both. Parenting is a lot of hoping you're not messing them up too badly. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I want to be good at this. Really good. Not just adequate. You're already good at it. I mean, she hesitated. I want to be important to her, not just daddy's girlfriend or the woman who lives with us. I want to matter. You do matter. You matter to both of us. But how will she think of me? In 10 years? In 20 years? When she looks back at her childhood, what will I be? It was a question Noah had asked himself late at night in the quiet moments when the future felt vast and uncertain. What was Vivian becoming to Lily? What could she become? I think, he said slowly, that she'll remember you as the woman who chose her, who showed up every day, even when it was hard, who learned to make pancakes badly and paint walls worse, who loved her not because biology required it, but because she wanted to. Is that enough? It's more than enough. It's everything. Vivian's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry this time. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, took a breath, and stood up. I'm going back in, she announced. Tommy and I have unfinished business. Please don't retaliate against a 5-year-old. I would never, she grinned. I'm just going to make sure I'm holding the beanbags next time. Noah watched her walk back to the chaos, watched her crouch down to Lily's level and say something that made his daughter laugh, watched her become more and more with each passing day exactly what they needed her to be, not a replacement, not a substitute, something entirely new. The night before everything changed again, they lay in bed together, the apartment quiet around them, Lily long since asleep down the hall. I've been thinking, Vivian said into the darkness. About what? About the future. About what comes next. What do you want to come next? She turned onto her side, facing him, though the room was too dark to see clearly. I want more of this. More ordinary days and messy dinners and bedtime stories. More arguments about closet space and negotiations about whose turn it is to do dishes. She paused. I want a life with you, Noah. A real life. Not just dating, not just living together. Something permanent. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm not asking anything. I'm just telling you what I want. Her voice was careful, controlled, the way it got when she was trying very hard not to be vulnerable. I know it's too soon. I know we've only been together for 6 months. I know that's not how these things are supposed to work. Says who? Says everyone. Society. The arbitrary rules about how long you're supposed to wait before making major decisions. Vivian. Noah reached out, found her hand in the darkness. I've never cared much about arbitrary rules. I know. That's one of the things I love about you. So what are you really saying? She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm saying that I love you. I'm saying that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I'm saying that when I imagine my future, for the first time in my life, I can't imagine it without you and Lily in it. She squeezed his hand. I'm saying that if you asked me to marry you tomorrow, I would say yes. But I'm also saying that I don't need you to ask. I just need you to know that I'm ready, that I'm not going anywhere, that this is it for me. The words hung in the air between them, honest and unprotected. Vivian, Noah said slowly, are you proposing to me? I'm pre-proposing, telling you that a proposal would be well received? That's the most corporate way anyone has ever almost proposed. Old habits, she laughed softly. I told you I'm still learning how to be human. Noah pulled her closer, wrapped his arms around her, felt her heartbeat against his chest. I love you, he said. I love every weird, complicated, control-freaky part of you. And when I'm ready to propose, when I found the right moment and the right words, I want you to know that it won't be because you told me to. It'll be because you're the best thing that ever happened to me and Lily, and I can't imagine spending the rest of my life with anyone else. Is that a yes? It's a yes, but let me do it properly. You and your proper ways. You love my proper ways. I do. She kissed him softly. I really, really do. They fell asleep tangled together, two people who had found each other against all odds, building something real from the wreckage of everything that had come before. And in the morning, Noah woke with a certainty that had been building for months, the kind of certainty that settled into your bones and refused to be questioned. He knew what came next. He knew exactly what he was going to do. The ring had been his mother's. Noah hadn't thought about it in years, hadn't let himself think about it honestly, because it lived in a small velvet box at the bottom of his sock drawer, carrying too much weight to examine casually. His mother had pressed it into his hands 3 weeks before she died, her fingers thin and trembling, her eyes still bright with the fierce clarity she'd maintained until the end. For someone who deserves it, she'd whispered. Not just someone you love, Noah. Someone who loves you back the right way. He'd given Elena a different ring, new, modern, something she'd picked out herself from a catalog. At the time, it had seemed practical. Elena wasn't sentimental about old things, and he'd wanted her to have what she wanted. Looking back now, he wondered if that had been a sign. If his instincts had known, even then, that his mother's ring was meant for someone else, someone who would understand what it meant to inherit love. He retrieved the box on a Tuesday morning in late May, while Vivian was at a client meeting and Lily was at preschool. The velvet was slightly dusty, the hinge stiff from years of disuse, But the ring inside was exactly as he remembered, a modest diamond in an antique setting, the gold worn smooth by decades on his mother's finger. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't expensive by Vivian's standards, probably cost less than the watch she wore to casual dinners. But when Noah held it up to the light, watching the diamond catch and scatter the morning sun, he knew it was perfect. Some things couldn't be measured in carats or clarity. Some things could only be measured in meaning. The plan came together slowly over the following weeks, assembled in stolen moments and whispered conversations. Noah enlisted Mrs. Patterson as a co-conspirator, explaining what he needed without quite being able to articulate why it mattered so much. She'd listened with the patient wisdom of someone who had seen love in all its forms, then patted his hand and said, "About time, dear. That woman looks at you like you hung the moon." He recruited Marcus from work to help with logistics, swearing him to secrecy under threat of being subjected to every photo of Lily that Noah had ever taken. Marcus had agreed enthusiastically, perhaps too enthusiastically, given how many times he'd accidentally mentioned romantic restaurants in conversation, but his heart was in the right place. The hardest part was keeping the secret from Vivian. She noticed everything. It was one of the qualities that had made her a brilliant CEO, this ability to read rooms and people, to spot discrepancies in data and behavior. Noah found himself second-guessing every word, every gesture, every deviation from routine. "You're being weird," she announced one evening, watching him from across the dinner table. "I'm always weird. Weirder than usual." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you planning something?" "I'm planning to finish these leftovers before Lily asks for seconds." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." "Vivian." He met her gaze directly, channeling every ounce of steady calm he'd developed over 4 years of single parenting. "I promise you, if I were planning something, it would only be something good." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she shook her head slightly and returned to her food. "Fine, keep your secrets." "I don't have secrets." "Everyone has secrets, Noah. The question is whether they're the kind that hurt or the kind that heal. And which kind do you think mine are?" She smiled, that real smile, the one that still made his chest ache every time he saw it. "I think yours are the healing kind. That's why I'm letting you keep them." The date he chose was June 3rd, exactly 1 year since she'd knocked on his door at 5 a.m. It seemed fitting, somehow. A full circle, a transformation completed. The night that had broken her open, becoming the night that sealed them together. He arranged for Mrs. Patterson to take Lily overnight, explaining that Daddy had something special planned for Vivian. Lily had accepted this with suspicious enthusiasm. "Are you going to ask her to marry you?" she demanded. "What makes you think that?" "Because that's what happens in the movies, when people love each other a lot and want to be a family forever." Noah crouched down to her level, struck as always by how much she understood. This small person who had only been on the planet for 5 years, but seemed to grasp things that took adults decades to learn. "Would that be okay with you?" he asked. "If I asked Vivian to marry me?" Lily considered this with appropriate gravity. "Would she be my mom then?" "That would be up to you and her to figure out, but she would be part of our family, officially." "Forever?" "That's the plan." Lily nodded slowly. "I think that would be good. She makes really bad pancakes, but she's nice, and she always listens when I talk, even when I'm saying boring things." "You never say boring things." "Sometimes I do, but she listens anyway." Lily looked up at him with those clear, trusting eyes. "I want her to stay, Daddy. I don't want her to leave like Mommy did." The words hit Noah like a physical blow. He pulled Lily into a hug, holding her tight, feeling the smallness of her body and the bigness of her fears. "She's not going to leave," he said quietly. "I can't promise you everything in the world, sweetheart, but I can promise you that Vivian loves us, really loves us, and she's not going anywhere." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Lily hugged him back fiercely, then pulled away with the emotional resilience of childhood. "Okay, you can ask her, but I want to be the flower girl." "Deal." The day of June 3rd dawned gray and drizzly. Typical Portland weather, the kind that locals learned to embrace rather than fight. Noah had planned for this possibility, adjusting his vision to accommodate the rain, finding beauty in the atmosphere rather than fighting against it. He told Vivian that he wanted to take her somewhere special, that she should dress casually, that she should trust him. She'd raised an eyebrow at the last part, but agreed without argument, which he took as a sign of how far they'd come. A year ago, Vivian Cross wouldn't have trusted anyone without a detailed itinerary and contingency plans. Now she was willing to follow him into uncertainty, believing that whatever he had planned would be worth the journey. They drove through the rain, windshield wipers keeping time, conversation flowing easily between them. Vivian talked about her consulting work, a new client who reminded her of herself 15 years ago, all ambition and sharp edges. Noah talked about Lily's latest obsession with dinosaurs and her insistence that pterodactyls could definitely beat dragons in a fight. "She has a point," Vivian said. "Pterodactyls were real. Dragons are fictional. Reality beats fiction." That's a very pragmatic approach to childhood imagination. "I'm a very pragmatic person." "You used to be. I think you're learning to appreciate a little magic." She smiled, reaching over to take his hand. "Maybe I am. Maybe someone's teaching me." They drove for 45 minutes, leaving the city behind, climbing into the hills where the Douglas firs grew thick and the air smelled like rain and earth. Noah had found this place months ago during one of his lunch break explorations, a small clearing in the forest, accessible by a winding path, overlooking a valley that disappeared into mist on days like this. "Where are we going?" Vivian asked as he pulled off the main road onto a gravel track. "Almost there." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting." They parked at the end of the track and Noah retrieved an umbrella from the back seat, large enough for two, sturdy enough for the rain. He came around to open Vivian's door, offering his hand. "It's a short walk," he said. "About 10 minutes. Are you okay with that?" She looked at the umbrella, at the misty forest surrounding them, at his face. Whatever she saw there made her expression soften. "Lead the way." They walked together through the rain, the umbrella creating a small dry world above them. The path was muddy but manageable, winding through ferns and fallen logs, the forest alive with the sound of water dripping from leaves. Vivian didn't ask any more questions. She just walked beside him, their footsteps synchronized, their breath visible in the cool air. The clearing emerged gradually, trees thinning, light increasing, the valley opening up before them like a secret finally revealed. Even in the mist, it was beautiful. Layers of green fading into gray, the distant suggestion of mountains, the whole world soft and quiet and timeless. "Oh," Vivian breathed. In the center of the clearing, Noah had set up what he could carry in multiple trips over the past week. A small canopy to keep off the worst of the rain, a blanket beneath it, a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, a speaker playing soft music that blended with the patter of rainfall. "Noah." She turned to face him, her eyes wide. "What is this?" "This is where I want to ask you something." "Ask me." He led her to the canopy, helped her settle onto the blanket, poured the wine with hands that were steadier than he'd expected. Then he set down the bottle, took a breath, and reached into his pocket. "1 year ago tonight," he began, "you knocked on my door at 5 a.m. I remember. You were crying. You were broken. You were everything I'd never seen you be, vulnerable and scared and human." He paused. "And when I opened that door, I had no idea that I was opening it to the rest of my life." Vivian's eyes were glistening now, but she didn't speak. She just listened, the way she had learned to listen over these months together. "You walked into my apartment that night looking for shelter from a storm. What you didn't know, what I didn't know, was that you were also walking into a home, my home, Lily's home, a place where we could learn to be a family together." He pulled the velvet box from his pocket, felt the weight of it in his palm. "This ring belonged to my mother. She gave it to me before she died and told me to save it for someone who loved me back the right way. I've been waiting 15 years to understand what she meant." He opened the box. The ring caught the gray light, modest and beautiful and full of history. "Vivian Cross, you are the most extraordinary person I have ever met. You're brilliant and complicated and sometimes impossible. You burn toast and paint walls badly and have opinions about children's movies that would start arguments at academic conferences." He smiled through the tears forming in his own eyes. "And you have changed my life in ways I never knew I needed. You've changed Lily's life. You've shown both of us what it means to be chosen, not out of obligation or convenience, but out of genuine, terrifying, wonderful love. He got down on one knee, the damp earth soaking through his pants, not caring at all. Will you marry me? The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever, seconds that felt like hours, the rain falling around them, the world holding its breath. Then Vivian laughed. It wasn't the reaction he'd expected, and for one horrible moment he thought he'd miscalculated everything. But then he saw her face, saw the tears streaming down her cheeks, saw the joy breaking through in waves, saw the woman he loved finally, completely letting go. You got down on one knee, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. In the mud, in the rain, you're going to ruin your pants. Is that a yes? Of course it's a yes. She pulled him up, pulled him close, kissed him with everything she had. Of course it's a yes, you impossible, wonderful, perfect man. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if his mother had known. And Vivian stared at it like she'd never seen anything so beautiful in her life. It was your mother's, she whispered. She would have loved you. You don't know that. I do, because she loved me, and she wanted me to be happy, and you make me happier than I ever thought I could be. He kissed her again, soft and slow. She would have loved you, Vivian. I'm certain of it. They stayed in that clearing for a long time, wrapped around each other under the canopy, drinking wine and talking about futures they were no longer afraid to plan. The rain continued to fall, but it felt different now. Not like something to escape from, but like something that was part of their story. The rain that had been falling when she first came to him. The rain that was falling as they promised to spend their lives together. When they finally drove home, the ring catching the light every time Vivian moved her hand, she kept looking at it with an expression of wonder. I thought I'd stopped believing in this, she said quietly. In what? In happy endings. In love that actually lasts. In being chosen by someone who sees all of you, the good and the bad and the complicated, and chooses you anyway. She turned to look at him, her gray-green eyes clear and certain. I thought that was a fairy tale, something that happened to other people. It's happening to you. It's happening to us. That's what I said. She laughed, wiping at her eyes. I'm going to be a mess for days, you know. Every time I look at this ring, I'm going to cry. I can live with that. You're going to have to. Forever. Forever, he agreed, and the word had never sounded so much like a promise. They told Lily the next morning. She had been staying with Mrs. Patterson, and Noah picked her up early, bringing her home to find Vivian in the kitchen attempting, once again, to make pancakes. They're for a special breakfast, Vivian explained, gesturing at the misshapen circles on the griddle. To celebrate. Lily looked at the pancakes dubiously. Celebrate what? Noah crouched down to her level, the same way he had when he'd asked permission to propose. Remember what we talked about? About me asking Vivian something important? Lily's eyes went wide. Did you ask her? I did. Did she say yes? Vivian crossed the kitchen, knelt down beside Noah, and held out her hand so Lily could see the ring. I said yes. For a moment, Lily just stared at the ring, processing. Then she looked up at Vivian with an expression that was suddenly serious. Does that mean you're going to be my new mom? Vivian glanced at Noah, uncertain. He nodded slightly, giving her space to answer. That's up to you, Vivian said carefully. I would never try to replace your mother. But if you want me to be, something like that, I would be honored. Lily considered this with the gravity of a child making the most important decision of her life. Then she said, Can I call you Mom sometimes? Not always, but sometimes? When it feels right? Vivian's composure cracked. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over, and she pulled Lily into a hug that was fierce and tender and full of everything she'd never thought she'd have. You can call me anything you want, she whispered. Anything at all. Even Pancake Lady? Vivian laughed through her tears. Even Pancake Lady. Okay. Lily hugged her back tightly, then pulled away with the practical efficiency of a 5-year-old. Can we have the special breakfast now? I'm hungry. The wedding was small, exactly as they had both wanted. They chose a garden venue outside Portland, a place with old rose bushes and winding paths and a small gazebo where they could exchange vows. The guest list was modest. Mrs. Patterson, Marcus, and his wife, Sarah Chen from Whitmore, a handful of colleagues who had become genuine friends. Vivian's consulting team was there, along with a few people from her old life who had proven themselves worthy of the new one. Lily was the flower girl, of course. She took her responsibilities extremely seriously, practicing her walk down the aisle for weeks before the ceremony, adjusting her technique based on feedback that no one had actually given her. On the day itself, she wore a white dress with purple flowers, her own design more or less, and scattered petals with the focused determination of someone diffusing a bomb. "She's perfect," Vivian whispered to Noah as they watched Lily march toward them. "She's ours," he whispered back. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate rituals or complicated traditions, just two people standing before the people who loved them, making promises they intended to keep. Noah had written his vows himself, struggling for weeks to find words that captured what Vivian meant to him. "Vivian," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "A year ago, you came to my door in the middle of the night, looking for shelter from a storm. You didn't know what you were looking for, and I didn't know what I was about to find. But when I opened that door, I opened it to everything I ever wanted." He paused, gathering himself. "You taught me that strength isn't about not needing anyone. It's about being brave enough to let someone in. You taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. You taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. And you chose us. You chose me and Lily, and you keep choosing us every day, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that choice." Vivian wiped her eyes. She had given up pretending she wasn't going to cry, and began her own vows. "Noah, I spent 43 years building walls. I built them out of achievement and ambition and the desperate need to prove that I was enough. I built them so high that I couldn't see over them anymore, couldn't remember what life looked like without them." She took a breath. "And then you came along with your daughter and your too small apartment and your paper towels, and you didn't try to climb my walls or knock them down. You just waited. You were patient with me when I didn't deserve patience. You were kind when I didn't know how to accept kindness. You showed me what it meant to be loved for who I am, not for what I've accomplished." She reached out, took his hands in hers. "I promise to keep choosing you," she continued, "every day, in every way, for the rest of my life. I promise to make terrible pancakes and learn from my mistakes, and show up even when showing up is hard. I promise to love Lily as my own, not because I'm replacing anyone, but because she has made room for me in her heart, and I intend to honor that room forever." Her voice caught. "I promise to be your partner, your teammate, your best friend. I promise to keep letting you in, even when it's terrifying. I promise to never stop being grateful that you opened that door." They exchanged rings, his mother's ring for Vivian, a simple gold band for Noah, and when the officiant pronounced them married, the small crowd erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the garden. Lily ran up to them before they could even kiss properly, inserting herself between them with the possessive confidence of a child who knew exactly where she belonged. "We're a family now," she announced. "For real." "For real," Noah agreed. "Forever," Vivian added. And then they kissed. All three of them somehow included in it, a tangle of arms and laughter and tears and joy, and it was messy and imperfect and absolutely, completely right. The year that followed the wedding was one of adjustment and growth, of learning how to be a family in official ways rather than improvised ones. Vivian officially adopted Lily 6 months after the wedding, a process that had required Elena's consent, which she gave with surprising ease. There had been a single phone call, awkward and strained, during which Elena had said, "She's better off with you, I know that. I've always known that." Noah hadn't known how to respond. Part of him wanted to rage at the woman who had walked away from her own child, but another part of him, the part that had spent years learning to release anger in favor of peace, simply said, "Thank you for giving her to us." "I didn't give her to you, I gave her up." Elena's voice had been flat, resigned. "There's a difference, but I'm glad she has someone who wants her. That's more than I could give." The adoption was finalized on a rainy Tuesday, because of course it was raining, and they celebrated with ice cream sundaes and a movie marathon featuring every dinosaur film Lily could find. "I have two moms now," Lily announced that night, studying her reflection in the bathroom mirror. "Sort of. One who born me and one who picked me." "Is that okay?" Vivian asked, brushing Lily's hair for bed. "It's more than okay." Lily turned to look at her with those wise, clear eyes. "You picked me, Mom. That's special." Vivian had to stop brushing for a moment, overwhelmed by the simple weight of that word, Mom. "You picked me too," she whispered. "I know, we picked each other." The consulting firm grew steadily, Vivian finding a rhythm that allowed her to be challenged without being consumed. She worked from home most days, setting up an office in the spare room, emerging for meals and homework help, and the 1,000 small moments that made up a family's life. She learned to cook, not well, but adequately, and discovered that she had opinions about interior design that went beyond hire a decorator. Noah continued at Whitmore, his work neither more nor less satisfying than it had been, but contextualized now by a home life that gave everything else meaning. He came home to dinner waiting, to Lily chattering about her day, to Vivian asking questions and actually listening to the answers. He came home to a family. They talked about the future often, late at night, after Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet. "I want to travel," Vivian said one evening, curled against Noah on the couch. "Not for business, for pleasure. I want to show Lily the world." "Where would we go?" "Everywhere. Italy, Japan, Australia, that little town in Ireland where my mother's family came from." She paused. "I never went there. I was always too busy, always chasing the next achievement, but I want to now. I want to stand where my grandmother stood and feel connected to something older than my ambition." "We can do that." "And I want—" She hesitated, and Noah felt her tense slightly in his arms. "What?" "I want to try, for a baby. I know I'm 44, I know it might not work, I know it's complicated, but I want to try." She looked up at him. "If you want to." Noah felt something shift in his chest, a door opening to a room he hadn't known existed. "I want to," he said. "I want everything with you, Vivian. However our family grows, whatever shape it takes, I want all of it. It might not work. Then we'll handle that together, like we handle everything." She kissed him then, soft and full of promise, and they stayed on the couch long after they should have gone to bed, dreaming about futures they were no longer afraid to imagine. The anniversary of the knock came around again, June 3rd, and they celebrated it quietly, just the two of them, after Lily was asleep. "1 year married," Vivian said, looking at the ring on her finger. 2 years since you opened your door to a stranger." "You were never a stranger." "I was. We both know I was. I was someone you worked for, someone who terrified everyone, someone so far removed from your life that we might as well have been different species." She smiled. "And now I'm your wife. Your partner, Lily's mother. Strange how life works. Strange and wonderful." They were sitting on the couch in their apartment, the 3-bedroom one, with the closet space Vivian had insisted on, and the bathtub that didn't make concerning noises. Outside, the Portland rain was falling gently, the same rain that had been falling when everything began. "I was thinking," Noah said, "about that first night, about why you came to me. Because I didn't know where else to go." "But you did. You could have gone anywhere. You could have driven to a hotel, called a friend, shown up at your ex-husband's door just to watch him panic." He turned to face her. "You came to me, specifically. Out of all the places in the world, you came to my door." Vivian was quiet for a moment, considering this. "I told you why," she finally said. "You were the only person who looked at me like I was human. But that's not the whole truth, is it?" She met his eyes, and he saw something there. Vulnerability, honesty, the willingness to be truly seen. "No," she admitted. "It's not the whole truth." "Then what is?" "The whole truth is that I had been watching you for months, not in a creepy way, just noticing how you talk to people, how you move through the office, how you never seem to need anyone's approval, but also never seem to judge anyone for needing it." She paused. "I noticed that you brought your lunch every day, sandwiches mostly, the kind someone makes with care, rather than obligation. And I wondered who was making them, who was caring for you. I make my own sandwiches. I know that now. But I didn't know it then. I just saw someone who seemed whole, complete. Someone who had figured out how to be happy without any of the things I thought were required for happiness. I wasn't happy. Not really. I was surviving. But you were surviving beautifully. You were raising a child alone, working a demanding job, living in that tiny apartment, and you still managed to be kind. To everyone, all the time. Her voice caught. I didn't understand how you did it, and I wanted to. I wanted to understand because maybe if I understood, I could figure out how to do it too. So you came to my door. So I came to your door. At 5 a.m., in the rain, falling apart. Because I had finally hit the bottom of everything I'd built, and the only person I could think of who might not judge me for it was you. Noah reached out, took her hand, intertwined their fingers. I'm glad you came. So am I. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. Every day I'm glad. Even on the hard days, especially on the hard days, I'm glad I knocked. They sat there together as the rain fell, as the city slept, as their daughter dreamed in her lavender bedroom down the hall. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something real from vulnerability and trust. Noah? Vivian's voice was soft, drowsy. Yes? The toast tomorrow morning, I think I've finally figured out the setting on the toaster. He laughed quietly. You've been trying for a year. I know, but I had a breakthrough. I think tomorrow's toast is going to be perfect. I'll believe it when I see it. Ye of little faith. Ye of burnt toast, historically. She swatted his arm gently, but she was smiling. Go to sleep, husband. Yes, wife. They made their way to bed, the same bed they'd shared for a year now. The same bed where they'd talked about futures and worked through fears and learned how to love each other in all the ordinary ways that added up to something extraordinary. In the morning, the toast would be slightly burnt, not quite perfect, but close. Lily would come padding out in her pajamas, demanding waffles instead. Vivian would laugh and pretend to be offended and pull out the waffle iron she'd bought months ago in anticipation of exactly this scenario. And Noah would stand in the doorway of their kitchen, watching his wife and daughter negotiate breakfast, and he would understand with perfect clarity that this was what he had opened his door to 2 years ago when a desperate woman had knocked at 5 a.m. Not just love, not just family, but a life rebuilt from the pieces of two broken ones, stronger for having been shattered, more beautiful for the cracks that let the light in. The knock that had woken him that rainy morning had seemed like an interruption. Now he understood that it had been an invitation, and he had been saying yes to it ever since. At 5 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday morning, exactly 2 years after that first desperate knock, Vivian slipped out of bed and padded softly down the hall. Noah heard her go, stirring slightly but not quite waking, comfortable in the knowledge that she would come back. She returned a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee, and tapped gently on their bedroom door. "Room service," she whispered. He opened his eyes to find her standing in the doorway, hair messy from sleep, wearing his old college t-shirt, holding the mugs like offerings. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice rough with sleep. "I'm recreating the moment." She crossed to the bed, handed him a mug, settled beside him against the headboard. 2 years ago, I knocked on your door at 5 a.m. I was broken and lost and didn't know where else to go. And you let me in. I remember. I know you do. But I wanted to mark it. I wanted to show you that the woman who knocked that night, the one who was so desperate she couldn't see any other options, she's not lost anymore. Vivian turned to look at him, her gray-green eyes soft in the early morning light. She found her way home. Noah set down his coffee and pulled her close, feeling her settle against him like she belonged there. Because she did. "Best door I ever opened," he said. "Best door I ever knocked on." They stayed there as the rain fell and the morning brightened. 2 people who had built something real from a moment of desperation, who had proven that love wasn't about perfection, but about presence, about showing up, about opening doors, about saying yes, again and again, to the messy, beautiful, ordinary miracle of being chosen. And in a lavender bedroom down the hall, a little girl dreamed of dinosaurs and pancakes and the family she had always deserved, the one that had knocked its way into existence and refused against all odds to ever leave.